Chapter 1900. Yi Xian was about to speak again when a group of divine sect powerhouses showed up at this moment. Yi Xian was shocked when he saw them. Wow, there were actually 9 seamless path powerhouses and 2 of them were divine spirit realm powerhouses. This lineup was a little fierce. Li Muqi hurriedly signaled to the divine sect experts. Everyone understood and saluted respectfully. Greetings, sect master. Sect master. Yi Xian was speechless. Just as he was about to refuse, Xue Tong suddenly transmitted his voice. Don't refuse. Yi Xian looked at Xue Tong and asked, why? Xue Tong said indifferently, think about it yourself. Yi Xian pondered for a moment and sighed inwardly. Divine Sect was currently besieged by powerful enemies. Since he had the Divine Sect Divine Ring, the forces outside would naturally think that he was Divine Sect's Sect Master. No matter how he explained, the forces outside wouldn't let him go. Moreover, the enemy's target was Divine Sect's Divine Ring, and it was in his hands. Most importantly, he couldn't take it off. Cut off his fingers? He had thought about it, but he found that the Divine Ring had fused with him. Even if he cut off his fingers, it would be useless unless he used the profound Science Sword to destroy it. Thinking of this, Yi Xian sighed softly. When he asked the Divine Spirit Palace woman if she would trick him, she said yes. Obviously she was referring to this. He didn't complain because he also benefited. Wanting to benefit but not doing anything, how could there be such a good thing in the world? Moreover, he needed Divine Sect. Thinking of this, Yi Xian looked at Li Muqi in front of him. Are you really willing to recognize me as Sect Master? Li Muqi hurriedly said, of course. The rest of the Divine Sect experts also hurriedly said, we are willing. Yi Xian smiled. I am only at the 16th phase. 16th phase. Hearing this, the expressions of the Divine Sect experts in front of Yi Xian became a little strange. Indeed a little weak. At this time Li Muqi said, our Divine Sect is willing to recognize you as Sect Master. Yi Xian looked at Li Muqi. Why? Li Muqi replied in a solemn voice. Because you were personally chosen by Sect Master Xianxia. The expressions of the experts from the Divine Sect changed when they heard Li Muqi. Water Sect Master. In other words, he was the previous Sect Master of Divine Sect. Yi Xian said, because I was chosen by her, so you acknowledge me? Li Muqi nodded. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? Because in my opinion she has already perished and all of you can elect a new Sect Master. Li Muqi said solemnly, only with the Divine Ring can one become the Sect Master. Because my Divine Sect's treasure, the Divine Seal, is within the Divine Ring. Yi Xian hurriedly said, I can return the Divine Ring to Divine Sect. Li Muqi shook his head. The fact that Sect Master Xianxia gave the Divine Ring to you means that she feels that you can lead my Divine Sect out of this predicament. As he spoke, he and the Divine Sect experts respectfully bowed. We are willing to pledge our lives to Sect Master. Yi Xian was slightly speechless. This is like forcing a duck onto a perch. At that moment, an old man at the side suddenly said, back then Sect Master Xianxia and the Temple Master of 10 Ultimate Shrine fought. In the end, we don't know where the 2 of them went, but we know that they have perished. All these years, my Divine Sect and 10 Ultimate Shrine have always been taking revenge on each other. In the beginning, neither of us could do anything to the other, but for some reason, Divine King Valley suddenly helped 10 Ultimate Shrine. Since then my Divine Sect could only defend passively. Xue Tong suddenly said, so, Divine King Valley is the key, right? The old man shook his head. Now, even without Divine King Valley, my Divine Sect's overall strength is inferior to 10 Ultimate Shrine. Xue Tong looked. This chapter is not over. Please continue to the next page. He glanced at the screen of light above him. How much longer can this formation last? The old man said, a month. A month. Xue Tong nodded slightly and looked at Yi Xian. You only have a month. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, tell me about the strength of my Divine Sect and 10 Ultimate Shrine. The old man said, my Divine Sect still has 2 Divine Spirit Realm experts, 12 Seamless Realm experts, 53 Seamless Realm experts, and 390 level 20 experts. As for the 10 Ultimate Shrine, they still have 5 Divine Spirit experts, 37 Seamless Dao experts, more than 70 Seamless Realm experts, and more than 500 Phase 20 experts. Yi Xian's face sank when he heard that. The difference in strength is so huge. It's a terrible mess. Meanwhile, Xue Tong suddenly said, their main objective is the divine ring? The old man nodded. Because there is a divine artifact and a technique within the divine ring. The divine artifact is called the divine ruler, and it has the ability to measure time and space. Besides that, there is also a supreme technique, the divine radiating scripture. Yi Xian frowned slightly. The divine radiating scripture? The old man nodded slightly. Only by cultivating this technique can one attain the fate chart realm. Yi Xian gazed at the divine ring in his hand. With a command in his heart, a thick golden ancient book suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. The divine radiating scripture. All the experts of the divine sect became excited when they saw the divine radiating scripture. Yi Xian glanced at the divine radiating scripture in his hand, and then he opened it. As soon as he did, a ray of golden light shot into the center of his brows. Bang! Yi Xian's body trembled violently as a huge amount of information surged into his mind. A short moment later, Yi Xian opened his eyes and Xue Tong asked, "How is it?" Yi Xian gazed at Xue Tong. "What do you mean?" Xue Tong said, "How is the technique?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "It seems to be just that." The expressions of all the experts of the divine sect instantly became strange. "Just that? Is that something a human would say?" Xue Tong said, "Can I have a look?" Yi Xian passed the divine radiating scripture to Xue Tong. The expressions of all the experts of the divine sect changed drastically when they witnessed this scene, and Li Muqi hurriedly said, "Sect master, you mustn't. The divine radiating scripture is the supreme technique of our divine sect. Besides the sect master, no one else is allowed to see it." Yi Xian suddenly said, "All of you can see it as well." All the experts of the divine sect were stunned when they heard this. Yi Xian gazed at Li Muqi. "All of you can see it as well." Li Muqi gulped and then he said, Isn't that a bit inappropriate?" Yi Xian smiled. "There's nothing inappropriate about it. All of you can see it. Of course I won't force you if you're unwilling." Li Muqi hurriedly said, "I'm willing. I'm willing." The other experts of the divine sect hurriedly said as well, "We're willing. We're willing." Xue Tong suddenly said, "Hurry up and thank the sect master." All the experts of the divine sect hurriedly bowed respectfully. "Thank you, sect master." Yi Xian smiled and then he passed the divine radiating scripture to Xue Tong. "Give it to them after you've seen it." Xue Tong nodded and took the scripture. Yi Xian suddenly gazed at Li Muqi and asked, "Can the divine sect summon an ancestor?" Li Muqi nodded, "Yes. However, it can only be done once." Yi Xian smiled, "I can finally summon an ancestor." Li Muqi was speechless. A short while later, all the experts of the divine sect had read the scripture, and it caused them to be extremely excited. After all, only the sect master could read such a supreme technique. Yet now Yi Xian had actually allowed them to read it for free. This chapter isn't over. Please continue to the next page. What's going on? On the other side, Yi Xian took out the divine ruler. At this moment he was studying it. After studying it for a while he shook his head. This divine ruler was indeed not bad. It could measure time and space and it could even manipulate time and space. However, compared to the Qingxian sword, the gap was really huge. Right at this moment, a powerful pressure suddenly pressed down from the sky. Everyone looked up and saw a man appear outside the screen of light. Li Muqi, who was beside Yi Xian, said in a low voice, "He's the current temple master of 10 Ultimate Shrine, Wuxia." Wuxia looked down at Yi Xian from the sky. "You're the current sect master of divine sect?" Yi Xian nodded. Wuxia smiled. "How interesting. They actually let a rank 16 ant be the sect master. Is there really no one else in the divine sect?" The expressions of the experts of the divine sect became slightly unsightly when they heard that. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Ancestor summon." "Ancestor summon?" The experts of the divine sect were slightly stunned. Yi Xian looked at Li Muqi. "Ancestor summon." Li Muqi hesitated for a moment and said, "Sect master, that's ancestor summon?" Yi Xian nodded. "Do you have a problem with that?" Li Muqi smiled bitterly. "Sect master, that's our final trump card." Yi Xian smiled. "Looks like all of you don't take me to be the sect master at all. Since that's the case, then I'll return the position of sect master to all of you." As soon as he finished speaking, he left with Xue Tong. The expressions of Li Muki and the others instantly changed drastically when they witnessed this scene, and one of the old men hurriedly said, "Ancestor summon." Quickly. Li Muki hurriedly nodded, "Ancestor summon." As soon as he finished speaking, bang! A powerful aura suddenly shot into the sky from below the divine sect. Muchio's expression instantly changed when he witnessed this scene. Is there something wrong with this new sect master? He summons Ancestor Summon at the slightest disagreement? Actually, it wasn't just Muchio, even the experts of the divine sect found it hard to understand. Ancestor Summon was the final trump card of the divine sect, and it had been used just like that. In the future, no other power would fear the divine sect. In the sky above the divine sect, an old man appeared before everyone. The divine sect's ancestor. The experts of the divine sect all knelt down. "Greetings, ancestor." The divine sect's ancestor swept the surroundings with his gaze. In the next moment his gaze descended onto Zhou Xian. When he saw the spatial ring on Zhou Xian's finger he frowned. "You're the current divine sect master?" Zhou Xian nodded. "That's right." The old man frowned slightly. "Why are you so weak?" Zhou Xian smiled. "You haven't matured yet." Everyone. At this moment a trace of surprise flashed through the old man's eyes. "You?" A moment later he grinned. "Natural fate. Interesting. Little fellow, you're very interesting." Zhou Xian bowed slightly, then pointed at Muchio. "Senior, can you kill him?" The old man turned to look at Muchio, and Muchio's expression instantly changed. This old man was a true Fate Realm expert. He didn't even think before turning to run. Muchio raised his hand slightly, then pressed down lightly. Boom. The distant horizon suddenly exploded. Following a miserable scream, countless amounts of blood splattered. Muchio's body was directly destroyed, but his soul had already escaped. The old man didn't chase after him. Instead he appeared in front of Zhou Xian and looked at Zhou Xian. "What's your name?" Zhou Xian said, "Little fellow Zhou Xian." The old man pulled Zhou Xian to the side and whispered, "How many big shots are behind you?" Zhou Xian. End of this chapter. Chapter 1901. A few big shots. Zhou Xian's expression was a little strange. Wasn't that a little too straightforward? The divine sect ancestor smiled. "Little friend, you were born with a 9-phase fate. If you didn't have a big shot behind you, you wouldn't have lived until now." Zhou Xian smiled. "Senior's eyes are like torches." The divine sect ancestor looked at Zhou Xian. "May I know what realm the big shot behind you is at?" Zhou Xian thought for a moment, then said, "I really don't know." The divine sect ancestor was silent. Zhou Xian said again, "Senior, it was a coincidence that I could become the divine sect master. I hope that Senior can choose a new sect master." The old man quickly said, "You are my divine sect master." Zhou Xian, the old man said again, "Little guy, I can still stay for a few days. Let me guide you for a few days, I hope it will be of help to you." Zhou Xian said solemnly, "Thank you very much." In the following time Zhou Xian began to cultivate with the old man. Under the old man's guidance, his cultivation and spatial attainments could be said to have improved by leaps and bounds. 10 Ultimate Shrine. On this day, a woman came to 10 Ultimate Shrine. The woman wore a purple dress and had shoulder-length hair. She held a sheathed longsword in her hand. The sheath was completely black and flickered with light. At this moment, 10 Ultimate Shrine Master Muchio appeared in the shrine. At this moment his body had recovered, but his face was still extremely pale. Muchio glanced at the woman and then cupped his fists. "Miss Maoshi." This was the most monstrous genius of Divine King Valley's current generation, born with a 3-phase fate. Maoshi nodded slightly. "Master Muchio, I heard that Divine Sect has a new sect master." Muchio nodded. "Yes. However, that person is only at phase 16, nothing to worry about." Maoshi looked at Muchio. "Master Muchio, do you think that Divine Sect will let a person at phase 16 be the sect master?" Muchio frowned. He had forgotten to think about this. Maoshi continued, "According to what I know, this person has a god ring, which means that he has obtained the approval of the previous sect master of the Divine Sect, Xuexing. Xuexing is a peak fate matrix expert, so how could someone who has obtained her approval be ordinary?" Muchio said solemnly, "But that young man is really only at rank 16. Maoshi shook his head. "Most of the time realms don't mean anything." Muchio asked, Then what does Miss Maoshi think? Maoshi said, first, get someone to investigate this person and find out his background. The second point is that the divine sect has already summoned its ancestors. They have now lost their final trump card. My master's meaning is that the divine sect should disappear. However, we need to investigate the new sect master's background first. Muchio nodded. I've already sent someone to investigate. Maoshi nodded slightly. Temple Master Muchio, Master has instructed us that after we destroy the divine sect, we only want the divine ring. Everything else will belong to the 10 ultimate shrine. Muchio replied, of course. Maoshi nodded and turned to leave. In the hall, Muchio was silent for a long time before he sighed softly. In the past, the 10 ultimate shrine was even stronger than the divine King Valley. However, following the fall of the previous temple master, the 10 ultimate shrine no longer had a life matrix powerhouse. Now the 10 ultimate shrine was the same as the divine sect. They had to obey the divine King Valley. This was because the divine King Valley had a life matrix powerhouse. After a while, Muchio looked outside the hall and frowned slightly. Divine ring. Why only one divine ring? Divine sect. At that moment, Yi Xian was sitting cross-legged on the ground, attempting to reach rank 17. In front of Yi Xian was the divine sect ancestor. The divine sect ancestor sized up Yi Xian, his expression becoming more and more solemn. After interacting with Yi Xian, he realized that not only did Yi Xian have an innate life matrix, but his bloodline was also extremely powerful. He had never seen such a powerful bloodline before. He was extremely curious about Yi Xian's background. Just then, where did this second generation come from? At that moment, the divine sect ancestor suddenly turned around and walked to the entrance of the hall. He looked into the distance and saw a powerful aura surging out from a nearby hall. That was the hall where Xuetong was. The divine sect ancestor said in a deep voice, "Divine spirit. This girl actually reached the divine spirit realm in less than a day. Amazing." At that moment, the hall's door suddenly opened and Xuetong walked out. Xuetong greedily took a deep breath, then slowly walked to the divine sect ancestor. Above the divine spirit is life matrix, right? The old man nodded. Xuetong asked, what is life matrix? The old man said in a deep voice, life matrix is equivalent to one's own fate. How many living beings can control their own fate? Countless living beings can't escape birth, old age, sickness and death or natural disasters. After reaching the life matrix realm, one can slowly control their own fate. Of course, whether they can truly control their own fate is unknown. Xuetong looked into the hall. What will happen if he reaches the life matrix realm? The old man smiled. Right now he has a natural life matrix and he has reached phase 9. If he reaches the life matrix realm, his cultivation speed will be at least 10 times that of a normal person. Simply put, once he reaches the life matrix realm, he will be invincible among his peers. This is because normal people need to cultivate, but if he doesn't, he will directly reach phase 9. Xuetong frowned. That's not fair. The old man nodded. It is indeed not fair, but there is no such thing as absolute fairness in this world. Look at this girl's bloodline. The old man has seen the world, but this kind of bloodline is something the old man has never seen before. This girl's father is definitely not a normal person. At this point he sighed and said, look, he was born with a good father. Aren't you angry? Xuetong took out a candied fruit and licked it, then said, I'm not angry. The old man was puzzled. Why? Xuetong said, I told him. His father is my father. The old man's face froze. Xuetong glanced at the old man and then he said, Old man, don't panic when you don't have a formidable father. Hurry up and find one. The old man was speechless. Xuetong continued, even though I don't have a life matrix at the 9th level, he does. So, if I follow him, it'll be equivalent to me having a life matrix at the 9th level as well. When she spoke up to this point, she licked the candied fruit and said, if I can't beat him, then I'll join him. Look, under normal circumstances, I might not be able to attain the divine spirit realm, but I've attained it in less than a month by following him. Sometimes, it's useless to bury your head in hard work. The old man couldn't help but give her a thumbs up. Little girl, this old man has learned something new. Xuetong gazed at Yi Xian, who was cultivating in the hall. As long as I have a powerful backer, the world is mine. The old man was speechless. At this moment, Yi Xian, who was in the hall, suddenly stood up. As soon as he stood up, a powerful aura swept out from his body. Phase 17. Yi Xian took a deep breath. He'd attained Phase 17 now. At this moment the divine sex ancestor appeared in front of Yi Xian. He sized up Yi Xian and then he said, "How do you feel?" Yi Xian opened his right hand and a sword appeared in his hand. In the next moment he directly entered the 7th layer of spacetime. Gradually he completely merged with the 7th layer of spacetime. At the same time, a powerful pressure appeared in the surroundings. Spacetime pressure. A moment later the corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly. He left the 7th layer of spacetime and looked at the divine sex ancestor. "Senior, I want to fight an expert of the seamless Tao." The old man hesitated for a moment and then he said, "I'm afraid it'll be a bit difficult." Yi Xian smiled, "I'll give it a try." As he spoke he looked at Xue Tong and Xue Tong said indifferently, "I'm already at the divine spirit realm." Yi Xian was stunned and then he said, "So fast?" Xue Tong nodded, "Yes." Yi Xian's expression was slightly strange. Isn't this little girl a bit too terrifying? She reached the divine spirit realm in less than a day? Meanwhile the old man smiled, "This little girl's foundation is too solid." She was already at the peak of the seamless Tao, and she was only a step away from the divine spirit realm. But after she saw the godly radiating scripture, she understood how to step into the divine spirit realm. Of course, if she didn't have the godly radiating scripture, it would probably take some time for her to reach the divine spirit realm. Yi Xian nodded lightly and then he looked at Xue Tong. "Congratulations." Xue Tong nodded, "Thank you." Yi Xian smiled and then he called over a seamless path powerhouse from the divine sect. This powerhouse was called Mu Yan and he was a powerhouse at the peak of the seamless path. In space, Yi Xian stood with his sword in hand and Mu Yan stood in front of him. Xue Tong and the divine sex ancestor watched from the side. Yi Xian smiled, "Let's begin." As soon as he finished speaking, the sword in his hand suddenly vanished. A flying sword. This sword directly folded space and time. In the distance, Mu Yan's expression instantly changed. He hadn't expected that Yi Xian's sword would be so swift, and he immediately clenched his right hand tightly. In an instant the space and time he resided in had transformed into a spatial wall. Bang! Yi Xian's flying sword had been blocked. Meanwhile Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of Mu Yan, and then an expansive sword light enveloped the space and time Mu Yan resided in. Rumble! The spatial wall exploded into pieces, and Mu Yan was blasted over 30 kilometers away. As soon as he stopped moving, a flying sword had already arrived at the center of his forehead. He lost. The divine sex ancestor's face sank when he witnessed this scene. "I underestimated his sword technique." In the distance Yi Xian sheathed his sword and smiled. If he held the green profound sword right now, then he would even be able to kill a divine spirit realm expert. The boost from the green profound sword was too terrifying. As if he'd thought of something, Yi Xian gazed at Xue Tong. "Miss Xue Tong, can I fully activate the energy of my bloodline?" Xue Tong thought for a moment and said, "Yes. But it's slightly dangerous. Because your bloodline is extremely abnormal, and you might not be able to control it." Yi Xian fell silent. Just as Xue Tong had said, he knew his own bloodline very well. Once it was activated, then his mind would be corroded by killing intent. He was quite worried. Actually, he slightly understood his father's actions. If his father didn't suppress his bloodline, then once he activated it, then it would be equivalent to playing with fire and getting burned. His bloodline was too unstable. Meanwhile, Xue Tong spoke abruptly, "It's fine. You can lend your blood to me in the future and I'll activate it. I'll be very happy to serve you." Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 1902. Yi Xian was speechless. Xue Tong could really borrow the power of his bloodline. In the end he gave up on the power of his bloodline. That was because he didn't dare to activate the power of his bloodline, especially now that there were no restrictions on it. If he activated it himself, he definitely wouldn't be able to resist the erosion of the power of his bloodline. However, he was also very curious about what it would be like if the power of his bloodline was completely activated. At that moment the divine sect master said, "I still have 2 days. What do you want me to do for you?" 2 days. Yi Xian was silent. He had to make good use of the divine sect ancestor's soul, or it would be a waste. Xue Tong suddenly said, You can go to the 10 ultimate shrine and self-destruct. Yi Xian was speechless. The old man glanced at Xue Tong and shook his head with a smile. It's useless. This strand of my soul is about to completely dissipate. Even if I self-destruct, it won't produce much power and won't hurt the 10 ultimate shrines foundation. Moreover, the Divine King Valley is a greater threat. Yi Xian shook his head and sighed. What a mess. The old man looked at Yi Xian and bowed slightly. Young man, please protect my divine sect. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Senior, there's no need for that. I've received benefits from divine sect, so I should help divine sect. I'll do my best. The old man smiled faintly. I'm relieved to hear this little friend's words. He hesitated for a moment before asking, Young man, is the person behind you from the mountain? Yi Xian frowned slightly. From the mountain? The old man was confused. Isn't he? Yi Xian asked, What's from the mountain? The old man said after a moment of silence, Dao Mountain. Yi Xian was confused. Dao Mountain? Where is it? The old man said in a deep voice, A very sacred place. Only those who have reached the 9th stage of Life Matrix realm can set foot on this mountain. Once they set foot on this mountain, they are known as the people from the mountain. When he spoke up to this point, he paused for a moment and said, I thought that the person behind you was someone from the mountain, but now it seems like that's not the case. Yi Xian was about to speak when Li Muqi suddenly appeared here, and he spoke solemnly. Ancestor Sect Master, I just received news that something big has happened in God King Valley and the 10 Ultimate Divine Hall. A huge commotion. The old man looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said, Are they going to launch a large-scale attack? Li Muqi nodded. It should be. Yi Xian said, With our current strength we definitely can't stop them, right? Li Muqi nodded. We can't. Not to mention all of them together, just the God King Valley alone is enough to destroy us. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then turned to look at Xue Tong. Do you have any good ideas? Xue Tong glanced at Yi Xian. Tell me your thoughts first. Yi Xian smiled and said, My idea is to scare them. Xue Tong licked his candied fruit. Right. Li Muqi was quite puzzled. Scare them? They aren't easily frightened. Yi Xian said, Let's give it a try. As he spoke, he gazed at Xue Tong. Cooperate with me. Xue Tong nodded. Alright. Yi Xian said, Then let's head to God King Valley right now. Li Muqi was stunned. Go to the God King Valley? Yi Xian nodded. Of our own accord. Li Muqi hesitated for a moment and said, Sect Master, you. Yi Xian smiled. They'll still return if I don't go. Since that's the case, then why don't I go on my own accord? As he spoke, he gazed at the Divine Sect's ancestor. Senior, you guard this place. The Divine Sect's ancestor spoke in a low voice. Little fellow, are you confident? Yi Xian smiled. I'm not. However, I can give it a try. The Divine Sect's ancestor hesitated for a moment before he said, Be careful. Yi Xian nodded. I will. Green City Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestor Yi Xian lacks talent and virtue. From this moment onward, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be removed, and Yi Lang shall succeed him. It was an old man in black robes who spoke. A young man stood not too far away from the old man, and he had a faint smile on the corners of his mouth. It was Yi Lang. The Yi clan's elders stood at his sides. Why? Right at this moment, a slightly timid voice suddenly resounded within the ancestral hall. Everyone looked towards the source of the voice and saw a young girl standing at the entrance. She was around 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the corners of her dress. Her face was sickly pale and she seemed slightly weak. Moreover, there was a trace of timidity in her eyes. The young girl was called Yi Ling and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan intended to remove Yi Xian from his position, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The young girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall and said timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is a prince. Why did you remove his title for no reason? The Great Elder looked coldly at Yi Ling. This is a clan matter, what are you interrupting for? Leave. Yi Ling was obviously afraid and did not dare to look directly at the Great Elder. However, she did not leave and mustered her courage to enter the ancestral hall. She once again bowed to the elders on both sides. Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He's fighting for the clan and we don't even know if he's dead or alive. Yet the clan is using a groundless excuse to remove his title. This is really unfair. Impudent. The great elder suddenly raged. Whether or not he is removed, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this moment the newly appointed Prince Yilang suddenly laughed. You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The great elder said coldly, then flog 30 times. Soon 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yiling clenched her fists and said angrily, this is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years and even now he's fighting for the clan. The clan is so unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the newly appointed Prince Yilang, and he knew that this was his chance to show off. The guard sneered, young Master Yilang inherits the title of prince and it's everyone's wish. What are you shouting for? As he spoke he raised his hand and slapped Yiling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yiling's face instantly turned red and swollen. However, she did not cry and only held her cheek tightly. Yilang looked at the guard and said with a smile, what's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the crown prince. Yilang nodded, you're very good. After I become the crown prince I'll need 10 guards. From now on you'll be my guard. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed deeply. I'll go through fire and water for the crown prince and I'll do anything for you. Yilang nodded slightly. Drag him out. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't show any mercy, understand? Zhang Mu glanced at Yilang and when he saw the murderous intent in Yilang's eyes, he understood. Immediately he grabbed Yiling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and he suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe and the robe was tattered and there was blood everywhere. This person was Yi Xian who had rushed back from the South Mountain. Seeing Yi Xian, Yilang's mouth curled into a cold smile. Inside the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes and his expression was frighteningly dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yiling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He hurriedly looked at Yilang and was about to speak, when Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Ping. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. However, Yiling did not stop there. He charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time Yilang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh. Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yilang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian looked up at him and snarled, your man? As he spoke he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me. Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yiling's side. Seeing Yiling's appearance, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yiling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed out. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Ping. Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi clan's elders. Why? At this time, a timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yiling and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. Yiling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yiling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall, and said timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is a prince. Why did you discard him for no reason? The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. This is a matter of the clan, why are you interrupting? Leave. Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the great elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince. Impudent. The great elder suddenly raged. Discard him or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time the new prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The great elder replied coldly, then flog her 30 times. Soon 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, this is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years. Even now he is risking his life for the clan. The clan is so unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, young master Yi Lang inherits the position of prince. What are you yelling about? As he spoke he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. However, she did not cry. She only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. What's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince. Yi Lang nodded. You're not bad. After I become the prince I will need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed. He hurriedly bowed deeply. This subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the prince. Yi Lang nodded. Drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't hold back. Do you understand? Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang. When he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu suddenly stopped as if he had seen something. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe. The robe was tattered and covered in blood. The young man was Zhou Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Zhou Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a sinister smile. Inside the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, his face dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Zhou Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Zhou Xian, his face changed. He hurriedly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time, Zhou Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Zhou Xian's fist landed on his face. Ping. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop there. He charged at Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, Zhou Xian, he's my man. How dare you? Zhou Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh. Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Zhou Xian looked up at him and said, your man? As he spoke, he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me. Zhou Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked up to Yi Ling. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Zhou Xian felt as though his heart was being cut by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Zhou Xian, her tears flowed. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Zhou Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Chapter 1903. Wuxia was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. Was that something a human would say? Shui Tong lowered his head slightly as the corners of his mouth curled up. He had so many backers. Nice. At this moment, Yi Xian sighed in a low voice. I also want to live a normal life, but I can't. He glanced at Wuxia. I'm in pain. Do you understand? Wuxia stared at Yi Xian. His gaze was like a sword, as if he wanted to cut Yi Xian into 1,000 pieces. Yi Xian spread his hands. Come kill me. I won't fight back. Wuxia clenched his fists as his entire body trembled. Yi Xian said angrily, What are you looking at? Come and kill me. Come here. Mu Qiu's expression became ferocious. Yi Xian said angrily, I beg you to kill me. Xue Tong was speechless. Mu Qiu's expression suddenly calmed down. He glanced at the Divine King Valley below before looking at Yi Xian. I won't kill you. I'll piss you off. After saying that, he left with the 10 ultimate shrine powerhouses. Yi Xian looked at Xue Tong and sighed. It's really painful to be a second-generation heir. It's really. Xue Tong suddenly punched Yi Xian's face. Bang! Yi Xian flew thousands of feet away. Xue Tong licked her sugar-coated paws and glanced at Yi Xian in the distance. You'll be struck by lightning sooner or later. Yi Xian was speechless. On the other side, Mu Qiu's expression was extremely ugly. A 10 ultimate shrine elder beside Mu Qiu said in a deep voice, Temple Master, Yi Xian is too arrogant. Mu Qiu said coldly, he has the right to be arrogant. The Divine King Valley must be afraid of him if they don't touch him. If the 10 ultimate shrine touches him, I'm afraid we won't be able to die straight away. The elder asked in a deep voice, what should we do now? After a moment of silence, Mu Qiu said, let's wait and see. If God King Valley doesn't make a move, then we won't. With that, he turned around and left. Yi Xian and Xue Tong returned to Divine Sect. Yi Xian continued to cultivate, and now he is trying to enter the 8th spacetime. Seamless spacetime. As soon as he entered the 8th spacetime continuum, he felt an extremely terrifying spacetime pressure. Not only that, there was a person who looked exactly like him standing in front of him. At this moment, Divine Sect's ancestor appeared beside Yi Xian. He looked at Yi Xian. Do you know what seamless is? Yi Xian shook his head. God Sect ancestor said solemnly, the so-called infinity is the infinity of time and space. In this space, time and space are limitless. Not only is it limitless, but it is also a mirror image. The person you see in front of you is actually you. As he spoke, he opened his palm and swept it lightly. In an instant, countless figures of him appeared here. Yi Xian was a little surprised. This is. God Sect ancestor said, each spacetime continuum is a different world. The core of the 8th spacetime continuum is the mirror image duplication. You can use spacetime to duplicate a mirror image. Of course, it is very difficult to do this. Even some divine spirit realm experts can't do it. Yi Xian was a little confused. Why is it difficult? God Sect ancestor said, because first you have to merge with the 8th spacetime continuum and then use the special characteristics of the 8th spacetime to duplicate a mirror image. Generally, those who can do this are at least in the life matrix realm. Divine spirit realm experts can at most use spacetime pressure and spacetime folding functions. At this point he paused and said, with your current strength, it is still very difficult to merge with the 8th spacetime continuum. Yi Xian sighed softly. At this moment he felt that it was really difficult. If the enemies were of the same level he really wouldn't be afraid, but the problem was that the enemies were several levels higher than him. One must know that those people on the mountain had their eyes on him, and those people on the mountain were at least in the 9th level of the life matrix realm. The 9th level of the life matrix realm. How to play. He felt a little helpless now. At this moment, Li Muki appeared and said in a low voice, Divine King Valley and 10 Ultimate Shrine are not moving. Yi Xian said softly, they are waiting for the people on the mountain to come down. God Sect ancestor said in a low voice, little guy, you were born with a 9th level life matrix. This is too attractive to those people on the mountain. 10 Ultimate Shrine and Divine King Valley don't dare to touch you, but the people on the mountain won't care. Yi Xian looked at God Sect ancestor. Senior, do you know much about this Dao mountain? God Sect ancestor shook his head. Not much. Because I didn't go up the mountain in the past. Yi Xian was a little confused. Why? God Sect ancestor was a little helpless. Because you don't have the qualifications. Yi Xian was speechless. A moment later, God Sect ancestor and Li Muki left. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground, deep in thought. He could already guess what would happen next. The people on the mountain would come down to find him and he couldn't beat them. At the crucial moment of life and death, either his dad, Qing, or his big brother would come out. In any case, this was the plan from before. It was as if he, Yi Xian, had been arranged by fate. Rely on himself? He really wanted to rely on himself. But for now, even if the Azure Profound Sword was unsealed, he definitely couldn't beat a 9th level life matrix. They weren't on the same level at all unless his bloodline was completely unsealed. However, other than his dad and Qing'er, no one could completely unseal his bloodline power. Moreover, even if it was unsealed, he couldn't control such a terrifying demonic bloodline with his strength. Yixian thought for a long time, Dad, I also want to rely on myself to solve everything, but the enemy is too strong. I really can't do it. I know you don't want me to be someone who relies on my dad. Don't worry, I won't rely on my dad. After saying that, he stood up and left. Xiaota suddenly said, Young master, are you really not going to rely on your dad anymore? Yixian nodded. I can't rely on my dad anymore. Otherwise he'll look down on me. Xiaota said in a low voice, What will you do if the people on the mountain come looking for you? Yixian frowned. Don't I still have my sister? Xiaota was speechless. Yixian came to the peak of a mountain and sat cross-legged on the ground. He slowly closed his eyes to sense the azure profound sword. Soon he felt the azure profound sword in his sea of consciousness. At that moment, the azure profound sword was locked by a ray of sword light, and it was his dad's sword light. Yixian said in a low voice, Qing'er, you forged this sword. I know you can hear me. I want you to help me unseal the azure profound sword. Before he could finish, the azure profound sword shook violently. Boom. The ray of sword light that locked the azure profound sword shattered. Then the azure profound sword appeared in front of him. Yixian was stunned and then said, Hi sister. At that moment Xiaota suddenly said excitedly, Young master, the seal that master left in my body has been unsealed. Yixian said in a low voice, Little soul, can you contact Qing'er? After a moment of silence, Little soul said, Young master, I can't contact her. Yixian thought for a moment and then said, If you can't contact her, then forget it. Then he looked at the azure profound sword in his hand and entered Xiaota's body. In Xiaota's body, Yixian entered the 8th spacetime. As soon as he entered the 8th spacetime, he used the azure profound sword to fuse himself with the 8th spacetime. At the same time, countless mirror images appeared. With the azure profound sword, the 8th spacetime was like his son. He could do whatever he wanted. Felt so good. Xiaota suddenly said, Young master, aren't you afraid that you'll rely on external forces? Yixian smiled. Xiaota, do you think relying on external forces or living is more important? Xiaota replied, Living. Yixian spoke softly, I have to live first. Obviously, my father only wants to train me, but he hasn't thought about how I should live. He paused for a moment and said, Xiaota, what do you think my father was thinking by sending me to such a dangerous place? Xiaota hesitated for a moment and said, Master might be thinking that he'll give birth to another one if you die. Yixian's face froze. A short while later, Yixian used the azure profound sword to arrive at the 9th spacetime. As soon as he entered the 9th spacetime, Yixian's expression changed drastically. At this moment he was in an unknown starry sky. It was deathly silent all around him and he could see countless stars. However, they were far beyond his reach. Right at this moment, an old man in a gray robe appeared before Yixian. Yixian's expression changed drastically. There's someone else here? The old man looked at Yixian and didn't speak. Yixian hesitated for a moment and said, You are? The old man suddenly looked at the sword in Yixian's hand, and he frowned when he saw it. Yixian hurriedly passed the azure profound sword to the old man. Take a good look. You must take a good look. Damn it, I'm afraid I'll be killed by you. The old man picked up the azure profound sword. A short while later, his expression became extremely solemn and he looked at Yixian. Who forged this sword? Yixian said, My younger sister. The old man frowned slightly. Your younger sister? Yixian nodded. The old man fell silent for a long time. What are you doing here? Yixian said, Sightseeing. The old man shook his head. It's dangerous. You should go back. Yixian thought for a moment and said, Senior, you can use this sword to find the person who forged it. You can give it a try. Xiaota was speechless. Damn it, this young master is too evil. He's starting to dig a hole for me. The gray-robed old man fell silent for a moment before he said, The old man would like to see the person who forged the sword as well. As he spoke, he held the green profound sword in a reverse grip. In the next moment, the green profound sword started to tremble violently, and the surrounding space actually started to become illusory. A moment later, he suddenly clenched his right hand tightly and shouted, Come out. As soon as he finished speaking, the space in front of him suddenly split open. In the next moment, a ray of light suddenly stabbed into the center of his forehead. At the same time, the ninth layer of space in an area of hundreds of thousands of kilometers was directly obliterated. The gray-robed elder's eyes widened in disbelief. I was King insta-killed? Just as the gray-robed old man was about to disappear completely, Xian hastily shouted, "Qing, show mercy. This senior is with me, he's one of us." Just as he finished speaking, the sword light between the gray-robed old man's eyebrows suddenly disappeared. The gray-robed old man's expression froze. His intuition told him that he had been tricked. Chapter 1904. At this moment, the gray-robed elder's heart could be said to be extremely shocked. He had almost been wiped out just now. He did not even have the strength to fight back. He was at the 10th stage of the life chart realm. He was a genuine 10th stage life chart realm cultivator. At this moment, Xian suddenly said, "Sir, are you all right?" The gray-robed old man came back to his senses. He hesitated for a moment before saying, "I'm not worthy of being called senior. I'm Yao Jun, the keeper of the 9th space-time order." Xian cupped his fists. Senior Jun Qing did not hold back. "This." Yao Jun shook his head. No, it's my fault. I offended that senior. It's my fault." As he spoke, he hesitated for a moment before he said, "Young brother, who is that senior?" Xian smiled. "What do you think?" Yao Jun was silent. He had not found the plain-dressed woman just now, but she had already sensed his presence. She had swung her sword from an unknown number of universes away and he had almost been killed instantly. The strength of this strength had completely exceeded his understanding. This was also what he feared the most. He was at the 10th stage of the life realm, a true powerhouse. Although he was not invincible, he was still a rare opponent. However, he had almost been killed in an instant. It was too terrifying. Xian suddenly asked, "Senior Jun, you said that you're the keeper of the 9th space-time order?" Yao Jun nodded. "Yes." Xian asked, "You're in charge of this space-time?" Yao Jun hurriedly shook his head. No, I'm just a keeper of this space-time order. The real keeper of this space-time is the Temporal Temple." Xian frowned. "The Temporal Temple?" Yao Jun nodded. "The 9th layer of space-time is very complicated, because this space-time is currently limitless, endlessly large, and its density is also endlessly large. Not only can it not be folded, it can't be twisted. It's as if this space-time is fixed. As for the Temporal Temple, they specialize in researching the 9th layer of space-time." Xian asked in a low voice, "That means there's no 10th space-time?" Yao Jun nodded. "We haven't found it yet." Xian was silent for a moment before looking at the azure profound sword in his hand. "Little soul, can you feel the 10th space-time?" Little soul trembled slightly. After a moment, little soul said, "I can feel it." Just as Xian was about to speak, Yao Jun's face was filled with disbelief. "This is impossible. This is absolutely impossible." Xian smiled. "Why not?" Yao Jun said in a deep voice. "The Temporal Temple has been to study the 9th space-time for countless years, but we have yet to find the 10th space-time order." Xian suddenly asked, "Senior, is it very difficult to distort the 9th space and time?" Yao Jun nodded. "It's not just difficult. In our opinion, it's simply impossible because the space-time density is simply too thick." At this moment, Xian suddenly held the Qingxian sword in his hand and gently guided it. In an instant, the space in front of him directly distorted. "Senior Jun, it doesn't seem difficult." Xian smiled. "Mr. Jun, it doesn't seem that difficult." Yao Jun was speechless. At this moment, Yao Jun's expression was incomparably solemn, and his heart was in turmoil. This human could distort the 9th space-time order? It was too terrifying. Xian suddenly asked, "Senior Jun, do you know Dao Mountain?" Yao Jun nodded. "I know about Daoist. What's wrong?" Xian smiled. "Nothing. I just have some conflicts with them. They want to take my fate." Yao Jun was stunned, then said in shock, "How dare they?" Xian sighed. "They're weak. Who else can they bully?" Yao Jun glanced at Xian and then he said, "My young friend, if that senior had acted just now, then wouldn't this mountain of the way have been obliterated with a flick of her finger?" Xian said, "How can I rely on others? I have to rely on myself." Yao Jun, Yi Xian asked again. Senior Jun, I'm leaving. Yao Jun hesitated. Take care, little friend. Yi Xian nodded. Then he turned around and disappeared. After Yi Xian left, Yao Jun immediately turned around and left. Not long after, he arrived at the Time and Space Palace. There were close to 100 time and space teleportation arrays in the palace, and a middle-aged man was sitting at the top of the palace. He was the temple master Xian. Yao Jun walked to Xian and bowed. Then he told him what had happened. Xian put down an ancient book and looked at Yao Jun. You were almost killed from countless universes? Yao Jun nodded. Yes. Most importantly, that young man could distort the ninth spacetime order. He did it with ease. Xian narrowed his eyes. Really? Yao Jun said in a low voice. Absolutely. However, he probably did it with the sword in his hand. Xian stood up. Where is he now? Yao Jun said. He left. Xian was stunned. Then he flew into a rage. Left? How could you let him leave? Yao Jun smiled bitterly. He said he wanted to leave. I didn't dare to stop him. I was afraid he would ask someone to kill me. Xian. Yao Jun hesitated. Temple Master Xian, what kind of divine being is that young man? Xian shook his head. How would I know? He looked at Yao Jun. Find that young man immediately. If you find him, invite him to the temporal temple. Yao Jun said in a low voice. There's one more thing. Daoist has his eyes on him. They want to take away his fate. Xian frowned. Is Daoist crazy? Yao Jun said. Daoist probably doesn't know the strength of the person behind him. Temple Master, if Daoist really attacks him, what should we do? Should we wait and see or? Xian fell silent for a long time. If that young man can deal with it himself, we won't care. If he can't, we'll take action. Yao Jun frowned. Fen Daoist? Xian said softly. It's worth it. Yao Jun nodded. Understood. Then he turned and left. After Yi Xian left the ninth layer of space, he entered Xiaota and started cultivating. Xiaota had been unsealed. 10 years inside was equivalent to 1 day outside. Now he could use Xiaota to close the gap in strength between him and his enemies. With the Qingxian sword, Yi Xian directly merged with the 8th layer of time and space. Not only that, but he was also immune to the 8th layer of time and space's power of time and space. Most importantly, after using the Qingxian sword, he could directly fold time and space 4 times. In other words, although he was only at the 17th layer, he could easily kill someone at the Divine Spirit realm. He could even fight someone at the Fate Chart realm. But the problem was that everyone on the mountain was at least at the 9th layer. Thinking of this gave him a headache. But now he couldn't think about anything else. His top priority was to improve his strength. With the Green Profound Sword and Xiaota, it was very easy to improve his strength. Not long after, Xuetong also entered Xiaota to cultivate. After discovering Xiaota's heaven-defying ability, Xuetong didn't leave. He stayed in the tower to cultivate every day. A few days later. A few days outside was 10 years inside Xiaota. Yi Xian had reached the 19th layer. Not only that, he also used the Green Profound Sword to perfectly merge with the 9th layer of space. He could now fold the 9th layer of space. To enter the 9th layer of space, only those at the Fate Chart realm could do it. To merge with the 9th layer of space was an impossible task, but he did it with the Green Profound Sword. Right now, he didn't even know what level his battle prowess had reached. 10 days later, Yi Xian reached the Seamless Realm. He was getting more and more adept at using the space-time Dao. He could now overlap 1 to 8 layers of space. On this day, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared in the sky above Divine Sect. The experts of Divine Sect all looked up. In the sky, the middle-aged man swept his gaze over Divine Sect. Where is Yi Xian? The moment he finished speaking, a sword beam appeared in front of the middle-aged man. The person who had come was Yi Xian. The middle-aged man sized up Yi Xian and narrowed his eyes. You really do have a special bloodline, and you're born with a 9th layer fate. Yi Xian glanced at the middle-aged man. Someone from the mountain? The middle-aged man nodded. Someone from the mountain. Yi Xian's expression darkened. This guy had a 9th layer fate. At this moment, the middle-aged man suddenly said, God King Valley's Valley Master Twilight Valley told me that you come from a low-level civilization. This is truly interesting. A low-level civilization actually produced a person with a special bloodline, and one with an innate 9th stage fate providence. It's not just interesting. Yi Xian smiled. Did you come here to strip me of my bloodline and fate? The middle-aged man nodded. Yes. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, Sir, I won't hide it from you. There's someone behind me. The middle-aged man smiled. I know there's someone behind you, but so what? Yi Xian smiled. Sir, do you not want to see the person behind me? The middle-aged man's lips curled up. Are you threatening me? Yi Xian shook his head. No, I just feel that you should take a look first before deciding whether or not to kill me. The middle-aged man stared at Yi Xian for a few moments before smiling. Then I'll take a look. Yi Xian hurriedly presented the azure sword to the middle-aged man. Sir, the person behind me is the person who forged this sword. With your strength, you can definitely use this sword to find the person behind me. Please begin. The middle-aged man glanced at the azure sword in Yi Xian's hand, and his eyes quickly narrowed. Your sword is rather extraordinary. Yi Xian smiled and said nothing. The middle-aged man glanced at Yi Xian and then said, Then let me see just who the person behind you is. As he spoke, he suddenly held the green profound sword in his right hand. In an instant, the space in the surroundings started to tremble. After a short moment, the middle-aged man suddenly raised his head, and as soon as he raised his head, a sword pierced directly into the center of his forehead before piercing all the way down. Boom. The middle-aged man's eyes went wide and his mind went blank. How the fuck did I get instantly killed? Chapter 1905. Dead. Even in death, the middle-aged man did not understand how he had died. On the side, Yi Xian put away the azure profound sword and then returned to the Xiaota to continue cultivating. Down below, the divine sect experts glanced at each other, dumbfounded. God King Valley. Within the tree hall, Twilight Valley reclined on a rattan chair, his right foot crossed over his left. His eyes were half closed and his right hand was lightly tapping the chair beside him. At this moment, Mao Shi entered the tree hall, her expression gloomy. Master, that person on the mountain has died. Twilight Valley's tapping finger stopped and after a few moments she softly asked, How did he die? Mao Shi hesitated, then said, It's said that he touched the sword in Yi Xian's hand, and then he was silently erased. Twilight Valley's brow creased. Touched the sword. Mao Shi nodded. Yes. After a long silence, Twilight Valley softly said, Although this person is not from the mountain, he is still no ordinary person. Mao Shi sternly said, Master, I carefully investigated this person. He came from a level 2 civilization. Twilight Valley suddenly shook his head. This means that this person is not simple. Mao Shi nodded. Truly. This person has many mysteries, especially the sword in his hand. It's said that when he wields the sword, he is immune to the pressure of spacetime and the spacetime abyss. Twilight Valley narrowed his eyes. Is that true? Mao Shi nodded. It should be true. After a long silence, Twilight Valley said, The person on the mountain will not give up. Continue watching. Mao Shi nodded and then withdrew. 10 Extreme Divine Palace. At this time, Wuxia had learned that the person on the mountain had died. Upon learning this news, he heaved a sigh of relief. Rejoice. He was very glad that he had not let his head get to work and attacked Yi Xian. Otherwise he might have been dead. Second generation. That bastard really was a second generation. Within the Xiaota. On this day Yi Xian suddenly stopped cultivating. A moment later he vanished and when he reappeared he was in front of Xue Tong. When he saw Xue Tong, Yi Xian was dumbfounded. Crimson Eye had already reached the life matrix realm. Xue Tong slowly withdrew a candied hawthorn when she saw Yi Xian, and then she licked it and said, You seem very surprised. You've reached the fate realm so quickly? Asked Yi Xian. Crimson Eye blinked. Is it that fast? Yi Xian was stunned and then he shook his head and smiled. He suddenly recalled that although only 7 or 8 days had passed in the outside world, 70 or 80 years had passed in Xiaota's body. However, even so it was still very fast. This Crimson Eye was not simple. Blood Eye suddenly asked, You reached stage 20? Yi Xian nodded. He had already reached level 20. Ever since Xiaota was unsealed, his cultivation speed was simply incredible. Suddenly, Xue Tong opened her palm, and the god radiating scripture appeared in her hand. She looked at Yi Xian. This is not bad, do you want it? Yi Xian looked at the god radiating scripture. I think this was originally mine, right? Xue Tong blinked and then she passed it to Yi Xian. What I mean is, if you don't want it, then you can give it to me. Yi Xian put away the god-radiating scripture. This little girl is very naughty. At this time Xue Tong asked again, can you lend me your sword to play with? Yi Xian opened his palm and the azure sword appeared in his hand. He looked at Xue Tong and smiled. You want to play with this sword? Xue Tong nodded. Just to have a look. Yi Xian smiled and then he passed the azure sword to Xue Tong. Xue Tong held the azure sword and after a while she frowned. No reaction? Yi Xian smiled. This sword can only be used by me. Xue Tong glanced at Yi Xian, and then she returned the sword to Yi Xian. Your sister made it for you? Yi Xian nodded. Xue Tong licked the candied fruit and then she said, ask her to make one for me as well. Yi Xian was stunned and then he asked, why? Xue Tong said seriously, didn't I tell you before? If your father is my father, then isn't your sister my sister? Yi Xian was speechless. Xue Tong asked again, is there a problem? Yi Xian chuckled. What do you think? Xue Tong thought for a moment and then she said, I'm strong and I can fight for you. So, helping me is equivalent to helping yourself. Yi Xian patted Xue Tong on the shoulder. I made my fortune by conning people. He turned and left as soon as he finished speaking. Xue Tong continued to lick the candied fruit in silence. In the following time Yi Xian started to try to break through to the seamless state. In fact, after the azure sword was unsealed, cultivation wasn't that important to him anymore. For example, even a 10th stage life matrix expert couldn't shake the 9th stage of time and space, but he could. However, he still had to go through this process. As for the problem of relying on external objects, he didn't want to think about it anymore. All he wanted now was to survive. If he really followed his father's method, he would be killed by the cruel reality sooner or later. But Yi Xian didn't know that the people of the temporal temple were frantically looking for him. One could enter the 9th stage of time and space from any world, so when Yi Xian left the 9th stage of time and space, Yao Jun was a little annoyed. This was because he realized that he had no idea which universe Yi Xian was in. After knowing that Yi Xian could distort the 9th stage of time and space, all the experts of the temporal temple were excited. They had researched for their entire lives just to understand the 9th stage of time and space, but there was almost no progress. The 9th stage of time and space was a barrier for all life matrix experts. As long as they understood the 9th stage of time and space, they would have the opportunity to break through the life matrix realm and reach a whole new level. However, after countless years of research, they still couldn't understand the 9th stage of time and space. They couldn't even distort the 9th stage of time and space, let alone fuse with it. But now, someone could distort the 9th stage of time and space. All the experts of the temporal temple were excited. In an unknown world, Yao Jun smiled bitterly. If he couldn't find Yi Xian, those old fellows of the temporal temple would really kill him. He was helpless. When Yi Xian said he wanted to leave, it wasn't that he didn't want to stay. The problem was that he didn't dare to. After all, he was so close to being wiped out. It was too difficult. After a while, Yao Jun turned around and left. He continued to search. 10 days later, a woman appeared in the clouds above the divine sect. She wore a white robe and tied her hair into a ponytail. She had sharp eyebrows and phoenix eyes, looking very heroic. There was a young man standing beside the woman. The man wore a brocade robe and stood straight. His eyes were as sharp as blades. The woman suddenly smiled and said, I didn't think that there would be someone born with a 9th stage fate in such a low-level civilization. Saying this, she looked at the man beside her and said, Brother Xiaoyun, what do you think? The man called Xiaoyun smiled and said, It's indeed a little abnormal. I think the person behind him must be extraordinary. The corner of the woman's mouth raised slightly. Second generation? Xiaoyun smiled and said, Special bloodline born with a 9th stage fate. If this person isn't a second generation, then what is? Looks like we have to be careful. The woman smiled lightly. Brother Xiaoyun, in terms of strength and background, who can compare to you? You were born with the world's strongest bloodline, the Flame God bloodline. Moreover, you were born with a 6th stage fate. Most importantly, you have the world's second strongest spacetime physique. Saying this, she shook her head and smiled. The scariest thing is that you also awakened the nether demon soul. Xiaoyun shook his head and smiled. Miss Lin Yao, since you're praising me like that, let me guess. You definitely want me to go meet this sect Master Yi first. It's best if I fight with this sect Master Yi until both of us are heavily injured, and then you can come and reap the benefits, right? Lin Yao was about to speak when Xiao Yun suddenly smiled and said, Miss Lin Yao, I'm just joking. How could Miss Lin Yao be so bad? I'm just joking. Lin Yao smiled and said, Brother Xiao Yun said you want to fight with sect leader Yi until both of you are injured. I don't think that sect leader Yi can threaten Brother Xiao Yun. According to what I know, sect leader Yi was only at the 17th stage, not even the divine spirit realm. But Brother Xiao Yun is now a 6th stage fate. As for the person behind sect leader Yi, in terms of background, who is stronger than you, Brother Xiao Yun? Xiao Yun laughed and said, Miss Lin Yao, you're making me a little arrogant. Lin Yao glanced at Xiao Yun and didn't speak. Xiao Yun suddenly smiled and said, he was born with a 9th stage fate chart, and he even possesses a special bloodline. Miss Lin Yao, if you obtain his fate chart and devour his bloodline. When he spoke up to here, he didn't continue. Lin Yao smiled lightly and said, Young Master Xiao Yun, aren't you tempted? Although your Yen clan's bloodline is number 1, I heard that sect leader Ye's bloodline is extremely special. If you devour his bloodline, then perhaps your bloodline will be able to suppress the entire Xiao clan. Moreover, sect leader Yi was born with a 9th stage fate chart. If you can obtain it, TSKGC. When they spoke up to here, the two of them looked at each other and smiled, each with their own thoughts. At this moment, the space in the distance suddenly trembled, and in the next moment, a man walked out. The man had long hair that draped over his shoulders, and he wore an evil smile on his face. Lin Yao smiled lightly when she saw the man. So it's Brother Yang Feng. The man called Yang Feng smiled and said, I thought I was late. I never expected that both of you wouldn't make a move. What? Were you waiting for me? Xiao Yun smiled and said, Brother Yang Feng, the two of us are slightly fearful, so we don't dare to make a move. Yang Feng roared with laughter. What? You want me to go first? Xiao Yun smiled, as you wish. Yang Feng glanced at them and then he shook his head with disdain. Both of you are really tired of living. It's such a simple matter, yet you keep thinking about it. How boring. If both of you aren't going to make a move, then I will. As he spoke, he turned around and looked down, and then he stomped his right foot against the ground and roared with laughter. Yi Xian, I know you're spying on us from the shadows. Quickly come out here and let me beat you to death. His voice rumbled like thunder and shook the sky. As Yang Feng roared with laughter, Yi Xian walked out slowly and he smiled as he walked over to Yang Feng. All right. As he spoke, his figure instantly became ethereal. In the next moment he'd entered the 9th level of space. After that, everyone watched as he swung his sword lightly, and the 9th level of space warped. The expressions of Lin Feng and the others changed drastically when they witnessed this scene. The 9th level of space was warped. Yi Xian glanced at Yang Feng, Xiao Yun and Lin Yao and he smiled, the three of you can come at me together. As he spoke, he gazed at Yang Feng and grinned, I'll believe you if you attack me twice. Chapter 1906. Needless to say, Xiao Yun and Lin Yao were extremely shocked. Warping the 9th level of space. Not to mention them, even their fathers couldn't do it. However, this human before them could actually warp the 9th level of space. That was too unusual. Even the arrogant Yang Feng fell silent at this moment. If he hadn't witnessed the warping of the 9th level of space, he wouldn't have believed it even if he was beaten to death. At this moment he knew that this human wasn't as simple as he'd thought. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly smiled. Someone came just now. He seems to be at the 9th stage of the fate chart realm. I don't know his name, but I know that he's too weak. He can't even withstand a single attack from me. How boring. As he spoke, he glanced at Lin Feng and the others. We're going to waste time. The three of you can come at me together. Xiao Yun and Lin Yao's expressions turned slightly unsightly. Meanwhile, Yang Feng suddenly spoke fiercely. Yi Xian, you're really arrogant, aren't you? Yi Xian suddenly looked at Yang Feng and smiled. Arrogant? Is that what you call arrogant? He shook his head and smiled. Let me show you what arrogance is. As soon as he finished speaking, his figure merged with the 9th level of space. Directly merged. Yang Feng and the others were dumbfounded by this scene. Merged with the 9th level of space. All of them were dazed. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly laughed with disdain. A low-level civilization that hasn't even comprehended the 9th level of space dares to covet my fate and bloodline? How laughable. Yang Feng and the others had slightly unsightly expressions on their faces. Meanwhile, Lin Yao spoke abruptly. Young Master Yi, I didn't come here to become enemies with young Master Yi. I just want to get to know young Master Yi. Yi Xian looked at Lin Yao. You know me? Lin Yao grinned. Yes. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Lin Yao, Yi Xian like to make friends. Let's talk somewhere else. Lin Yao was stunned and then she smiled. All right. As soon as they spoke, they vanished on the spot. Xiao Yun and Yang Feng's expressions were unsightly to the extreme. After a short moment, Xiao Yun said softly, This Miss Lin Yao is really flexible. Yang Feng's face was gloomy but he remained silent. He had never suffered such humiliation before. He had wanted to make a move just now. But reason won over impulse. That guy could distort the 9th layer of spacetime. Not only that, but it could also fuse with the 9th layer of time and space. Xiao Yun suddenly said, Looks like we've underestimated this young Master Yi. With that he turned around and left. After a moment of silence, Yang Feng also left. On the other side, Yi Xian and Lin Yao were walking slowly in the clouds. Lin Yao smiled and said, To be honest, we underestimated young Master Yi. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Lin Yao, can you tell me about the powers of Daoist Mountain? Lin Yao was a bit surprised. Young Master Yi doesn't know about Dao Mountain. Yi Xian asked, Do you think I should know? Lin Yao blinked. Young Master Yi, are you from a higher civilization? Yi Xian smiled and said, What do you think? Lin Yao smiled and said nothing. Yi Xian suddenly said, Miss Lin Yao, I'll take you to a place. With that he brought Lin Yao into Xiaota. After entering Xiaota, Lin Yao was stunned. Soon her expression changed drastically. This. Yi Xian brought Lin Yao away from Xiaota. Lin Yao clenched her fists, her eyes were filled with shock. Yi Xian walked to Lin Yao and smiled. Miss Lin Yao, we'll meet again. With that he turned around and disappeared into the distance. Lin Yao was silent for a long time, then turned around and left. Yi Xian returned to Xiaota and began to cultivate crazily. He had tricked Lin Yao and the others into leaving, but he knew that they would come back soon. His top priority now was to improve his strength as soon as possible. Xue Tong stopped cultivating. She had reached the life matrix realm, so it would be impossible for her to improve in a short time. On this day, Xue Tong came to Yi Xian. Yi Xian, who was cultivating, opened his eyes and looked at Xue Tong. What's the matter? Xue Tong took out a stick of candied hawthorn and licked it, then said, Tell me what might happen next. There are two possibilities. The first is that Dao Mountain couldn't resist the temptation and will kill you at all costs, taking away your bloodline and life matrix. The second is that they are afraid of you and start to investigate you. With that she looked at Yi Xian. Can they find out who's behind us? Yi Xian frowned. Us? Xue Tong licked the candied hawthorn. Your backer is my backer, of course my backer is also your backer. Yi Xian looked at Xue Tong. Do you have a backer? Xue Tong nodded. My backer is your backer. Yi Xian, Xue Tong said, Lin Yao was scared by you just now. The force behind her might become your helper, but I don't think it's very likely. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? Xue Tong said, helping you is equivalent to becoming enemies with other forces. Moreover, they might want the sword in your hand, your life matrix and your bloodline. With that she looked at Yi Xian. All living beings are greedy, there are no exceptions. Yi Xian smiled. Then what do you think I should do now? Xue Tong thought for a moment, then said, Do you think Dao Mountain will give you a lot of time? Yi Xian shook his head. Xue Tong asked again, Can you reach the life matrix realm in another 10 days? 10 days was equivalent to 100 years. Yi Xian shook his head once more. Moreover, even if he could, he wouldn't dare to rush into it. It would not be a good thing to advance his cultivation realm too quickly. His current goal was the seamless realm. Xue Tong continued, Since that's impossible, we have to think of a way to deal with Dao Mountain. Yi Xian looked at Xue Tong. How? Xue Tong smiled. One word. Pretend. Yi Xian's lips perked up. Great minds think alike. 2 hours later, Yi Xian and Xue Tong headed for God King Valley. The moment they arrived, Twilight Valley appeared before them. Yi Xian smiled. Valley Master Twilight Valley, I will be going to Dao Mountain. Twilight Valley was taken aback and then he smiled. Take care, Sect Master Yi. Yi Xian walked up to Twilight Valley and smiled. Valley Master Twilight Valley, after I leave, you won't have any thoughts about the divine sect, right? Twilight Valley hurriedly shook his head. I wouldn't dare. Yi Xian smiled. I have received benefits from the divine sect and promised Sect Master Shuixing to protect the divine sect. so I do not wish for God King Valley to make trouble for the divine sect. Is that all right? Twilight Valley smiled. Young Master Yi, your journey to Dao Mountain is long. You must be careful. The meaning behind his words was that whether or not he would move against the divine sect would depend on whether or not Yi Xian could survive. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly unsheathed his sword and slashed. Unsheathing the sword determined life and death, and this strike was layered with 4,800 slashes. Twilight Valley paled at this strike, and she hurriedly raised the sphere of light in her hand to block. Boom! The sphere of light shattered and countless rays of blue light shot out. The surrounding spacetime was annihilated, and Twilight Valley herself was pushed back tens of thousands of feet. But before she could stop, a sword was pressed against her forehead. The ninth spacetime folding. This strike was so fast that not even Twilight Valley, who had reached the Life Matrix realm, could react in time. Twilight Valley was dumbfounded. She didn't even have the ability to fight back against this scoundrel? In truth, Yi Xian was also dumbfounded. He had never imagined that after he folded up the ninth layer of spacetime, the flying sword would reach this level of speed. In that moment, the azure profound sword had been so fast that not even he could react. Too terrifying. At this moment Twilight Valley sternly said, "Young Master Yi, my God King Valley will no longer touch the divine sect." Yi Xian looked at Twilight Valley. A moment later the azure profound sword sank into Twilight Valley's forehead. Boom! Twilight Valley was absorbed. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Naive. Promise. That thing was just like one's character. Oftentimes it was worthless. The azure profound sword flew out of Yi Xian's hand. A moment later, all the divine spirit realm experts in God King Valley were slain by him. An hour later Yi Xian turned and left. It wasn't long before he returned to the 10 Ultimate Divine Hall. The moment he arrived, Wuxia appeared in front of him. Yi Xian was about to speak when Wuxia hurriedly said, "Young Master Yi, my 10 Ultimate Divine Hall was wrong." Yi Xian was dumbfounded. Wuxia continued, Wuxia had eyes but failed to recognize young Master Yi and offended him. I ask that young Master Yi be magnanimous and let my 10 Ultimate Divine Hall off. As he spoke, he hurriedly took out a spatial ring and placed it in front of Yi Xian. This is a small token of my appreciation. Please accept it, young Master Yi. Yi Xian looked at Wuxia. You know about God King Valley? Wuxia hesitated for a moment before nodding. Yi Xian suddenly slashed out with his sword. Swish! Wuxia's head flew into the air, and his soul was instantly absorbed by the azure profound sword. Yi Xian issued a command in his heart, and the azure profound sword flew into the 10 Ultimate Divine Hall. It wasn't long before all the divine spirit realm experts within the 10 Ultimate Divine Hall were killed by him. Never believe the nonsense of your enemies, and never show mercy to your enemies unless you don't have the strength to do so. Who would lie when they had the strength? 2 hours later, Yi Xian headed towards Dao Mountain. On the way, Xuetong suddenly said, "You seem to be very strong." Yi Xian nodded. I noticed it as well. Xuetong suddenly asked, "Do you know how to get to Dao Mountain?" Yi Xian's expression froze when he heard this. He really didn't know. Xuetong licked his candied fruit and said, "Are you joking?" Yi Xian glared at Xuetong and then he brought Xuetong into the 9th layer of space. Even though he didn't know how to get to Dao Mountain, the guardian of the 9th layer, Yao Jun, definitely knew. As soon as he entered the 9th layer of space, the space in front of him started trembling and then Yao Jun walked out. When he saw Yi Xian, Yao Jun was stunned at first, and then he pounced in front of Yi Xian and said excitedly, "Young Master Yi, I finally found you." Yi Xian was stunned and then he said, "Elder Jun, why are you looking for me?" Yao Jun hurriedly said, "Young Master Yi, the Hall Master wants to see you." Yi Xian blinked. "Your temporal temple?" Yao Jun nodded. Yi Xian immediately shook his head. "I'm not going." Yao Jun was slightly puzzled. Why? Yi Xian said seriously, "I'm afraid I'll implicate all of you." Yao Jun was even more puzzled. "What do you mean, young Master Yi?" Yi Xian sighed in a low voice. "Dao Mountain wants to kill me. If I go to the temporal temple, won't I implicate all of you?" Yao Jun immediately said, "My temporal temple isn't afraid of Dao Mountain." Yi Xian said, "I'm afraid." Yao Jun blurted out, "As long as my temporal temple is here, no one can touch young Master Yi." Yi Xian was about to say something, but at this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from the side. Is that so? My Yang clan would like to see if your temporal temple can protect him. As the voice fell, a powerful aura suddenly appeared on the scene. Yi Xian looked at Yao Jun and said seriously, Elder Jun, you will protect me, right? Yao Jun. P.S. Please vote. It's the new year. Please vote for the new year. Chapter 1907. Dao Mountain's Yang Clan. Yao Jun's expression turned ugly. There were 3 great clans in Dao Mountain: Shao Clan, Yang Clan, and Lin Clan. Although these 3 clans would usually compete with each other secretly, they would be extremely united in the face of external enemies. This was because the ancestors of these 3 clans were once good friends. Before they died, they had left behind their ancestral teachings that if there was an external enemy, the 3 clans must stand together and fight together. Temporal Temple might not be afraid of Dao Mountain, but Dao Mountain wasn't afraid of them either. If they really fought, the odds were 50-50. Yi Xian looked to the side and saw an old man walking over slowly. The old man wore a black robe and his hands were hidden in his wide sleeves. His eyes were like knives and his body emitted a domineering aura. Seeing the old man, Yao Jun's expression darkened. Life Body Realm. Life Chart Realm was divided into 10 levels, and after that was Life Body and Life Soul. What was Life Body? It referred to the strengthening of one's fleshly body. Generally, reaching the Life Body Realm meant that one had already grasped the power of destiny. This was an extremely mysterious power, and once one reached the Life Body Realm, ordinary godly items wouldn't be able to break through their defenses. The old man glanced at Yi Xian and sneered. Then he looked at Yao Jun with a cold expression. Your temporal temple wants to protect this human? Yao Jun was about to speak, but the old man suddenly shouted angrily, Don't talk nonsense. If you want to protect him, my Dao Mountain will declare war on your temporal temple. We will fight to the death. If you can't protect him, then leave immediately to avoid harming the relationship between my Dao Mountain and your temporal temple. Overbearing. Yao Jun's expression turned ugly. Declare war on the Dao Mountain? He definitely didn't have the authority to make such a decision. At this moment, Temporal Temple's temple master Xi Qian suddenly appeared. Seeing Xi Qian, Yao Jun heaved a sigh of relief. Boss is here. Xi Qian looked at the old man. Are you threatening my temporal temple? Yang Clan's elder sneered. Threatening? Temple master Xi Qian, my Dao Mountain has no enmity with your temporal temple. Why would I threaten you? As he spoke, he pointed angrily at Yi Xian. This human killed my Dao Mountain's experts. My Dao Mountain is here to seek justice. Yi Xian glanced at the Yang clan old man but did not speak. Xi Qian glanced at Yi Xian before turning to the Yang clan elder. Sir, this young master Yi is a guest of my temporal temple. If there's anything, can we talk about it another day? The Yang clan elder stared at Xi Qian. Does that mean that your temporal temple is going to protect him? Just as Xi Qian was about to speak, the Yang clan's elder spoke again. Hall Master Xi Qian, this person belongs to my Dao Mountain. If your temporal temple dares to stop us, then that old man can tell you that from this moment on, we will fight to the death until one side is exterminated. Hearing this, Xi Qian's face turned ugly. Fight to the death. He wasn't afraid of the Dao Mountain, but was it worth it to fight the Dao Mountain for a human? One had to know that the Dao Mountain was no ordinary power. If they really fought to the death, even if the temporal temple won, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded in Xi Qian's mind. Hall Master, this human isn't simple. Our temporal temple can let him fight with the Dao Mountain, and we can sit back and reap the benefits. That's a good idea. Hearing this, Xi Qian glanced at the distant Yi Xian. Yi Xian's expression was calm without a trace of panic. That voice sounded in Xi Qian's mind again. This person has no relationship with my temporal temple. It's not worth it to fight the Dao Mountain for him. The grudge between them is too deep. Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestor Yi Xian has no talent and no virtue. From this moment on, Yi Xian's position as prince will be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man wearing a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a youth. The youth had a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi clan's elders. Why? At this moment, a timid voice suddenly sounded in the ancestral hall. Everyone looked over and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old. Her 2 small hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face was sickly pale and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of timidity in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's biological sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian from his position, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall and said timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The Great Elder looked coldly at Yi Ling. This is a matter of the clan. Why are you interrupting? Leave. Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the Great Elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince. Impudent. The Great Elder suddenly raged. Whether he is crippled or not, it is not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time the new prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. You should be flogged 30 times as a warning. The Great Elder coldly replied, Then do it 30 times. Very quickly 2 Yi clan's guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years. Even now he is fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, Young Master Yi Lang inherits the title of prince. What are you shouting for? As he spoke he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap was heard. Yi Ling's right cheek instantly turned red and swollen. However, she did not cry. She only covered her cheek tightly. Yi Lang sized up the guard and asked with a smile, What's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the crown prince. Yi Lang nodded. You are very good. After I become the prince I will need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed. He quickly bowed deeply. I will go through fire and water for the prince. I will not hesitate to die 1,000 deaths. Yi Lang nodded slightly. Drag him out. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Do not show mercy. Understood? Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang. When he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu suddenly stopped as if he had seen something. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe. The robe was tattered and covered in blood. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall the elders frowned. The Great Elder narrowed his eyes. His face was dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Zhang Mu felt dizzy and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there. He rushed towards Zhang Mu again. At this time Yi Lang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man. How dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh. Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, Your man? As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me. Yi Xian ignored Zhang Mu and walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being cut by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors above, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides there were the Yi clan elders. Why? Right at this moment, a slightly timid voice suddenly resounded within the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling, Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she rushed over despite her illness. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The girl called Yi Ling bowed to everyone in the hall and asked timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The Great Elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. This is a matter of the clan, what are you interrupting for? Leave. Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the Great Elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince. Impudent. The Great Elder suddenly raged. Whether or not he is crippled, it is not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time the new prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The Great Elder replied coldly, Then do it 30 times. Very quickly 2 Yi clan guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years and even now he is fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, Young Master Yi Lang inherits the position of prince. What are you yelling about? As he spoke he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. However, she did not cry and only covered her cheek tightly. Yi Lang sized up the guard and asked with a smile, What's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the crown prince. Yi Lang nodded. You are very good. After I become the prince I will need 10 guards. From now on you will be my guard. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and quickly bowed deeply. I will go through fire and water for the prince and I will do anything for you. Yi Lang nodded. Drag him out. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Do not show mercy, understood? Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu suddenly stopped as if he had seen something. Inside the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside the hall. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe that was tattered, and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall the elders frowned. The Great Elder narrowed his eyes and his face was dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there and charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time Yi Lang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, your man? As he spoke he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me. Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. Brother, it hurts, Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Chapter 1908. He wasn't calling for help. The old man from the Yang clan spoke fiercely when he heard Yi Xian. Since you're not calling for help, then this old man will beat you to death. He waved his right hand as he spoke. Kill. As soon as he finished speaking, the experts from the Yang clan charged forward. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly took a step forward. Bang! A ray of light instantly drowned the space in front of him, and it didn't take long for a shrill cry to resound from within the ray of light. An expert at the 10th level of the Fate Realm had perished. Meanwhile, Yi Xian swung his sword once more. Bang! An expert at the 10th level of the Fate Realm was blasted 30 kilometers away, and a flying sword pierced through the center of his forehead as soon as he stopped moving. Bang! The expert's body was instantly crushed, and his soul was instantly absorbed by the green profound sword. The old man's face turned extremely unsightly when he witnessed this scene. He realized that the powerhouse at level 10 of the life realm could not do anything to Yi Xian at all. Not only could he not do anything to Yi Xian, but he was also being slaughtered by Yi Xian like a chicken. It was too terrifying. In the distance, Yi Xian was just about to attack again. However, right at this moment, an invisible giant hand suddenly appeared above Yi Xian and then it slammed down. Yi Xian's expression changed drastically, and he suddenly raised his head and stabbed with his sword. Bang! The ray of light was instantly shattered, and Yi Xian was blasted out of the 9th level of space. When he stopped, his entire body split open and blood sprayed everywhere. Right at this moment, the space he resided in actually started burning, and it seemed like some powerful force was approaching him. Meanwhile, Xue Tong's voice suddenly resounded in Yi Xian's mind. Run! Yi Xian didn't hesitate at all. He turned around and vanished into the horizon, and as soon as he vanished, the region he resided in was instantly obliterated. It was forcefully obliterated. Yi Xian's expression changed drastically when he witnessed this scene. Suddenly, the space behind him cracked open and then a fist smashed down towards him. There was no space-time pressure, nor was there any space-time suppression. It was just pure power. Yi Xian cried out in pain. What he feared the most was this kind of pure power. Unable to dodge, Yi Xian suddenly turned around and blocked with his sword. Sword domain. That fist landed right in front of Yi Xian. Boom. The sword domain instantly shattered. Yi Xian's eyes widened and he was sent flying hundreds of thousands of feet away. He couldn't care less about his shattered organs and he turned around and rode his sword, disappearing into the horizon of the starry sky. Not long after he left, the experts from the Yang clan appeared. Meanwhile, a voice resounded. He's heavily injured. All of you follow him. I'll be there in 2 hours. The leading old man bowed respectfully. Yes, Patriarch. Having said that, he led the Yang clan and the other experts to chase after them. On the other side, Xiqian looked into the distance. No one knew what he was thinking. Meanwhile, Yao Jun appeared by Xiqian's side and he spoke in a low voice. Does the Hall Master intend to attack? Xiqian nodded. The reason Yi Xian's combat strength is so formidable is that sword. That sword is the key. We must obtain that sword. When he spoke up to hear, a strand of cold light flashed through his eyes. Yao Jun was about to say something when Xiqian suddenly vanished on the spot. Yao Jun remained silent for a long time before he sighed softly. He knew that his hall master had been blinded by greed, and he'd only seen the benefits before him while ignoring the dangers that lurked in the shadows. A long time passed before Yao Jun turned around and left. He wasn't returning to the temporal temple, he was fleeing. His intuition told him that if he continued staying in the temporal temple, then a sword might descend from the sky one day and he'd perish. Yi Xian was flying through the boundless starry sky. At this moment his injuries could be said to be extremely severe. The shattering of his sword domain was the greatest injury to him. Not only had his body split apart, even his soul had suffered a heavy injury. He wanted to stop and recuperate, but the problem was that there were people chasing after him. At this moment Xue Tong suddenly appeared beside Yi Xian. She looked at Yi Xian and asked, "How long will it take for you to recuperate?" Yi Xian replied, 15 minutes. Xue Tong licked her candied fruit and said, "Go back to Xiao Ta and recuperate. I'll block them for you." Yi Xian looked at Xue Tong and asked, "Are you sure?" Xue Tong nodded. However, Yi Xian shook his head. Although you're at the Life Matrix realm, they're all at the 10th stage. You can't beat them. Shui Tong said, lend me some blood. Yi Xian was speechless. Shui Tong suddenly pulled Yi Xian's hand. Stop wasting time. As she spoke, she suddenly exerted force and Yi Xian's wrist split open. A stream of blood spurted out and she sent Yi Xian into Xiao Ta's body. Yi Xian didn't think too much about it and went straight to recuperate. As soon as Yi Xian entered Xiao Ta's body, the experts of the Yang clan appeared here. The old man who led the group looked at Shui Tong and asked, "Where is he?" Shui Tong licked her candied fruit and said, "He abandoned me and ran." The old man's eyes narrowed slightly. "He ran?" Shui Tong nodded. "Yes." The old man stared at Shui Tong for a long time. He naturally didn't believe Shui Tong. As soon as he finished speaking, he ordered the experts of the Yang clan behind him to charge forward instead of charging forward. Shui Tong closed her eyes slowly, and Yi Xian's blood suddenly started to boil in her right palm. A moment later, she opened her eyes abruptly. Bang! A powerful bloodline pressure instantly swept through the surroundings, and one of the experts of the Yang clan who was charging at the front didn't even have time to react before he was crushed and obliterated. The old man's expression changed drastically when he witnessed this scene, and he hurriedly retreated. Meanwhile, Shui Tong suddenly took a step forward and smashed her fist forward. Bang! A blood-red fist flashed through the battlefield and smashed directly towards an expert of the Yang clan. That expert's expression changed drastically, and he swiftly raised his arms to block it while space condensed. Bang! As soon as the fist arrived, the space in front of that expert was instantly blasted into pieces. At the same time, he was obliterated by the blood-red fist. Shui Tong was just about to attack again when the old man suddenly pressed his right hand down. Bang! The expansive space where Shui Tong resided collapsed. At the same time, she fell into the 8th level of the spatial abyss. As soon as she fell into the spatial abyss, the powerful force there started to destroy her. Shui Tong's brows knit together slightly. She wasn't Yi Xian, so she couldn't disregard the spatial abyss. Suddenly, a sword appeared beneath Shui Tong's feet. It was the Green Profound Sword. The Green Profound Sword had taken Shui Tong out of the spatial abyss. The old man's face instantly fell when he witnessed this scene. What the hell is this sword? It's actually able to take someone out of the spatial abyss. Meanwhile, Shui Tong withdrew a candied fruit in an unhurried manner. She licked it and then she gazed at the old man. "I'm out again. Are you angry?" The old man from the Yang clan was speechless. Shui Tong glanced at the Green Profound Sword and spoke softly, "It's so nice to have a younger sister." Even though she couldn't use the sword, it could help her. Moreover, she wouldn't feel any pressure at all when she had it by her side. Shui Tong suddenly activated Yi Xian's bloodline again, and then she charged forward. The old man's expression changed drastically, and he retreated explosively while another expert in front of him was instantly blasted into pieces. Shui Tong was just about to attack again. Meanwhile, the old man from the Yang clan suddenly opened his palm and pressed it down. The space above Shui Tong instantly warped, and then a powerful wave of spatial pressure swept down and was about to crush Shui Tong. Shui Tong frowned slightly and was about to retreat when Yi Xian's voice suddenly resounded in her mind, "Don't move." As soon as he finished speaking, the Green Profound Sword in Shui Tong's hand trembled slightly. Shui Tong's figure instantly became ethereal when the powerful spatial pressure descended upon her, and she was completely unharmed. The old man's expression instantly became unsightly when he witnessed this scene. Shui Tong glanced at the Green Profound Sword and sighed with praise. "I like the feeling of being second generation." Xiao Ta was at a loss for words. Right at this moment, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared here, and it was the Hall Master of the Temporal Divine Palace, Zhou Xian. Shui Tong gazed at Zhou Xian while his brows knit together slightly. Zhou Xian gazed at Shui Tong. "Tell young Master Yi that I want his sword. Give it to me and I won't attack at all. You should understand what I'm doing if I attack." Zhou Xian thought for a moment and handed the sword over. Xiao Ta suddenly said, "You're handing it over just like that?" Shui Tong replied, "A wise man submits to circumstances. Understand?" Xiao Ta was at a loss for words. Zhou Xian was stunned when he saw Shui Tong hand the sword over. He was already prepared to attack. However, he hadn't expected that this little girl would actually hand the sword over. Shui Tong suddenly said, "Don't you want it?" Xian glanced at Xue Tong and then he opened his palm and the sword fell into his grasp. After he confirmed that it was the real deal, Xian turned around with the intention of leaving. However, the old man from the Yang clan suddenly obstructed his path. The old man stared fixedly at Xian. "This sword belongs to my Yang clan." Xian grinned. "Do you know what realm of cultivation I'm at?" The old man's pupils constricted when he heard this. "A fate soul." Xian laughed savagely. "You know that I'm a fate soul, yet you still dare to speak to me like that? Are you an idiot?" As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly slapped his palm down. Bang! The old man from the Yang clan didn't even have the chance to react before his body was blasted into pieces. The expressions of the other experts from the Yang clan changed drastically when they witnessed this scene. Xian intended to leave after he killed the old man from the Yang clan. Meanwhile, Xue Tong suddenly said, "Since they're enemies, then why not kill them all?" As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and fled. The rest of the Yang clan's experts were stunned. Kill them all. In the next moment, their expressions changed drastically. Wasn't this King referring to them? They wanted to flee, but it was too late. In the distance, Xian directly sent out a palm strike, and those Yang clan experts were instantly killed. Xian turned to look at where Xue Tong had been standing. At this moment, Xue Tong had already disappeared without a trace. Xian hesitated for a moment, but in the end he did not choose to chase after them. After all, there was no need to do so. The most important thing now was to bring this sword back to the temporal temple. The experts of the Yang clan had died with everlasting regret. P.S. Asking for votes. Chapter 1909. On the other side of the starry sky, Xue Tong stopped. Xian appeared in front of Xue Tong. In fact, his injuries had already healed. Xue Tong looked at Xian. "Will you blame me for handing over the sword?" Xian smiled. "Why would I blame you?" Xue Tong looked at Xian for a long time. "You're so sneaky, but I like it." Both of them had the same thought. Leaving the Qingxian sword in Xian's possession would be a disaster. Not only would the Dao Mountain come after Xian, but the Temporal Temple would also come after him. Giving the green profound sword to Xian was tantamount to making the Yang clan and Temporal Temple enemies. This would buy time for Xian. What he needed the most now was time. Xian suddenly asked, "Temporal Temple's Temple Lord killed the Yang clan's people?" Xue Tong nodded. "All of them." Xian smiled. "How ruthless." Xue Tong looked at Xian. "What are your plans?" Xian slowly closed his eyes. A moment later, he said in a deep voice, "Do you remember the mysterious expert who attacked me?" Xue Tong said, "I think it was the Yang clan's patriarch." Xian said softly, "With my current strength, I can't fight against such an expert." Xue Tong comforted him. "Don't be afraid. We have father. If father can't do it, we still have sister." Xian. At this time, Xiao Ta suddenly said, "This sister Xue Tong is already infatuated with the second generation." Xian said seriously, "Xue Tong, we have to rely on ourselves." Xue Tong nodded. "I understand. Unless it's absolutely necessary, we can't call for help. We have to train ourselves. I understand all of this." Xian. Xue Tong took out a stick of tonghulu and licked it. Then he said, "Can I ask a question?" Xian smiled. "What question?" Blood Eye looked at Xian. "Just how powerful is your sister?" Xian was about to speak when Xiao Ta suddenly said, "Don't ask. You're invincible if you ask." The invincible sister Tianming. Xue Tong asked again, "What about his father?" "The azure-robed man." Xiao Ta laughs. "Let me put it this way. Master was once beaten by sister Tianming, do you understand now?" Xian wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. Damn it, he now felt that it was too dangerous to be with this Xiao Ta. Ever since this fellow had been transformed by Qing'e, he had become so arrogant that he no longer cared about anyone but Qing'e. Xue Tong licked the candied fruit and said, "Xiao Ta, this invincible." Xiao Ta immediately said, "Invincible in all aspects. There's no opponent. There's nothing in the entire universe that big sister Tianming can't solve with one sword." Xian was speechless. Xue Tong nodded and said, "I understand." Xian shook his head. "Let's not talk about this. Our top priority is to cultivate. I want..." At this point, Xian's face instantly changed. He suddenly turned around and saw a middle-aged man in a white robe standing a few hundred meters in front of him. He and Xue Tong didn't know when the middle-aged man had appeared. Both of their expressions turned solemn. The middle-aged man sized up Yi Xian and said with a smile, "I think you must think that my Yang clan should go against the temporal temple, right?" Yi Xian said solemnly, "You're the Yang clan's patriarch." The middle-aged man said with a smile, "Yes. The Yang clan's patriarch Yang Lian." Yi Xian smiled lightly, "Why did you come to me first?" Yang Lian walked slowly towards Yi Xian, "Because I feel that you're the biggest threat." Yi Xian frowned slightly, "I'm the biggest threat?" Yang Lian nodded, "You're only at the 20th rank, but you were able to take 2 of my attacks head-on. I've never seen such a monstrous genius like you." Yi Xian turned to look at Xue Tong. "It's all because you're too outstanding." Xue Tong looked at Yi Xian, "We're on the same side. Don't pretend, all right?" Yi Xian. Meanwhile, Yang Lian said, "You gave the sword to the temporal temple on purpose because you wanted my Yang clan to fight the temporal temple to the death so that you could reap the benefits. Am I right?" By Yi Xian's side, Xue Tong said in a low voice, "This enemy is quite smart. What should we do?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "Fists can't solve problems. We have to be reasonable." As he spoke, he looked at Yang Lian and opened his palm. A drop of blood floated slowly in front of Yang Lian, and Yang Lian's eyes instantly narrowed when he saw this drop of blood. Yi Xian said with a smile, "Sir, to tell you the truth, my father is not an average person. He..." Right at this moment, Yang Lian suddenly took a step forward and smashed his fist forward. Yi Xian's pupils constricted. He practically didn't hesitate to grab Xue Tong behind him, and then he took a step forward and activated his sword domain. Bang! A fist smashed down. Yi Xian's sword domain trembled violently before it collapsed, but the fist was still there. Yi Xian suddenly raised his arms in front of him, and the first 8 layers of time and space condensed into a space-time wall. Rumble! Yi Xian's arms were blasted apart, and then his figure was blasted flying. Beside him, Crimson Eye looked at Yi Xian, who was sent flying with a dull look in his eyes. If Yi Xian hadn't pulled her behind him at that instant, then she would have absolutely been unable to resist that punch. Yi Xian flew for over 30 kilometers before he finally stopped, and a strand of blood sprayed from his mouth as soon as he did. Xue Tong had just appeared in front of him when she opened her palm, and then the blood that sprayed from Yi Xian's mouth fell into her palm. Xue Tong glanced at Yi Xian, and then she stuffed the candied fruit into Yi Xian's mouth. After that, she turned around to gaze at Yang Lian. Yang Lian smiled. "Young man, you showed me your bloodline because you want to tell me that there's someone formidable standing behind you, right?" As he spoke, he shook his head and smiled. "If I saw your bloodline at the beginning, then perhaps I would have considered going against you. But now enmity has formed between us. Since enmity has formed between us, then we're enemies. The best way to deal with an enemy, especially an extraordinarily monstrous genius, is to eliminate that person before that person can grow. Understand?" As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly vanished on the spot, and then a powerful aura swept through the surroundings and obliterated the space here. A wisp of ferocity flashed through Xue Tong's eyes as she stood before Yi Xian, and then she suddenly clenched her right hand. Bang! Yi Xian's bloodline instantly started burning. A moment later, she took a step forward and smashed her fist forward, and a strand of terrifying force swept out from her fist. 2 formidable forces collided head-on in the most forceful manner possible. Rumble! As soon as their forces collided, the space in the surroundings was obliterated and shattered into pieces. Xue Tong was instantly blasted flying, and she flew over 30 kilometers away. As soon as she stopped moving, her body shattered into pieces and only her soul remained. In the distance, Yang Lian glanced at his fist. His fist had completely cracked open and his bones were exposed. A wisp of a solemn expression flashed through Yang Lian's eyes when he witnessed this scene. He knew that he'd underestimated this human's bloodline. It's absolutely not an ordinary bloodline. Who exactly is this human? A string of questions flashed through Yang Lian's mind. Yang Lian didn't give it any further thought and just gazed at Yi Xian, and he didn't conceal his killing intent at all. It's better for such a monstrous genius to die young. When he thought up to here, Yang Lian took a step forward and then he suddenly clenched his right fist. In an instant, the space around him had warped, and even the 1st to 8th levels of space had warped. Xue Tong clenched his fist slowly. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly said, "I'll do it." Xue Tong turned to look at Yi Xian and Yi Xian grinned, "Enter the pagoda." Xue Tong gazed at Yi Xian, "You'll die." Yi Xian immediately placed Xue Tong into Xiao Ta, and then Xue Tong intended to leave the pagoda but was stopped by Xiao Ta. Xue Tong spoke furiously, "Let me out." Yi Xian paid no attention to Xue Tong and he gazed at Yang Lian instead. Yang Lian said, "You were born with a 9th-level fate chart. Come, let me see how tough your life is." As he spoke, he was about to attack. Meanwhile, Yi Xian's eyes slowly closed while the blood within him started to seethe. Bang! In an instant, a strand of monstrous killing intent and evil energy swept out from the surroundings. Yang Lian frowned when he witnessed this scene. This killing intent is quite unusual. At this moment, Yi Xian, who was in the distance, suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes were like a sea of blood. Bloodline activation. At this moment, Yi Xian hadn't activated his bloodline for a very long time, and the powerful killing intent and evil energy it emanated had directly suppressed his mind. Because Xue Tong had unsealed his bloodline in the past. Even though he'd only unsealed it slightly, it wasn't something he could control right now. Suddenly, Yi Xian opened his palm, and then a blood-red sword suddenly appeared in his hand. In the next moment, he vanished on the spot. A strand of blood-red light suddenly flashed, and it tore everything in its path apart. A wisp of a cold glow flashed through Yang Lian's eyes. He took a step forward and smashed his fist forward, and a strand of powerful force erupted from his fist like a volcano. It was a head-on collision. Bang! An expanse of blood-red light suddenly erupted, and then the starry sky in the surroundings was obliterated and transformed into a pitch-black spatial black hole. On the other hand, Yi Xian was blasted over 10 kilometers away, but Yang Lian was pushed over 3 kilometers back as well. Yang Lian's expression instantly became ferocious after he stopped moving. At the same time, he was quite shocked in his heart. The energy of this bloodline is actually so terrifying. Yi Xian suddenly walked towards Yang Lian with his blood-red sword in hand. Yang Lian stomped his right foot against the ground, and then a fist suddenly arrived in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian swiftly slashed down with his sword. Bang! The sword light shattered and then Yi Xian retreated explosively once more. This time he retreated by almost 30 kilometers. However, Yang Lian had retreated by over 10 kilometers as well. Yi Xian's current strength was sufficient to shake him. Yi Xian was about to attack again when Yang Lian suddenly flipped his right hand. In the next moment, the expansive space where Yi Xian resided collapsed, and then he was blasted into the 8th spatial abyss. But this time, Yi Xian didn't have the green profound sword. However, Yi Xian was still completely fine. Because the formidable energy of his bloodline had directly resisted the formidable energy within the spatial abyss. Yang Lian's expression was slightly unsightly when he witnessed this scene. "What sort of freak are you?" Meanwhile, a voice suddenly resounded from the side. "Looks like Brother Yang Lian needs help." As soon as this voice resounded, a middle-aged man appeared not too far away from Yang Lian. It was the Shao clan's patriarch, Shao Tian. Meanwhile, another voice resounded. "He really does need help." As soon as this voice resounded, an old man appeared on Yang Lian's right. It was the Lin clan's patriarch Lin Shao. The 3 great leaders of Dao Mountain were gathered here. Right at this moment, a voice suddenly resounded from the side. "Are you bullying the weak? That's not good." The 3 of them turned around and saw a woman walking over slowly from afar. Chapter 1910. Yang Lian's eyes narrowed slightly when he saw the woman. "You're the person behind him?" The woman glanced at Yi Xian, who had been thrown into the spatial abyss, and smiled. "I'm his older sister." "Older sister?" Yang Lian sized her up and smiled. "You want to save him?" The woman smiled. "Patriarch of the Yang clan, forgive me for being blunt, but you're quite stupid." Yang Lian's face instantly sank and he smashed his fist forward. Bang! The woman in the distance was thrown into the spatial abyss. However, the woman within the spatial abyss was completely unharmed. Seeing this scene, the expressions on the faces of Yang Lian and the other 3 underwent a wonderful change. The woman continued. "In half a month at most, the temporal temple will far surpass your Dao Mountain." Yang Lian stared fixedly at the woman. "What do you mean?" The woman smiled. "You're underestimating that sword." That sword doesn't just disregard the spatial pressure and the spatial abyss. It can enter the 9th layer of spacetime and fold it. Most importantly, it can fuse with the 9th layer of spacetime. Once Zhou Xian comprehends its secrets, his strength will instantly surpass the Fate Soul stage. Hearing that, the faces of the three of them sunk. The woman glanced at Zhou Xian and then she smiled. The most valuable thing in his possession isn't his bloodline or fate, but that divine sword. Why would Zhou Xian not hesitate to go against all of you to seize that divine sword? Because that divine sword can allow him to fuse with the 9th layer of spacetime and allow him to attain a new height. The expressions of Yang Lian and the others were quite unsightly. The woman continued. So what if the three of you obtain this little fellow's bloodline and fate? It can't allow the three of you to attain a higher level. Yang Lian suddenly said, you want us to fight the temporal temple to the death. The woman smiled and then she looked at the Shao clan's patriarch Shao Tian and the Lin clan's patriarch Lin Shao. What do the two of you think? The two of them fell silent. Of course they were thinking about that divine sword. The fact that the temporal temple had seized it by force proved everything. However, Zhou Xian was also a threat. Thinking of this, the three of them looked at each other and decided to kill Zhou Xian first before snatching the divine sword. At this moment, the woman had already entered the 9th layer of spacetime with Zhou Xian. The next moment the woman and Zhou Xian disappeared. Seeing this scene, Yang Lian's face fell, and he was about to give chase when Shao Tian suddenly said, stop chasing. Yang Lian looked at Shao Tian and Shao Tian said solemnly, this woman is very mysterious. She was actually able to bring that young man out from the spacetime abyss. Her strength is extraordinary. Even if we catch up to her, we don't have full confidence that we can defeat her. Our top priority now is to go to the temporal temple and take back that divine sword. Yang Lian said in a low voice, we're letting Zhou Xian off just like that. Lin Shao glanced at Yang Lian. Then why don't brother Yang Lian continue chasing after this Zhou Xian while the two of us head to the temporal temple? Hearing this, Yang Lian's expression turned cold. What do you mean? Lin Shao said indifferently, nothing. I just want brother Yang to understand that once Zhou Xian comprehends the secret of that sword, our Dao Mountain will have to bow down to the temporal temple. Yang Lian was silent. The Shao Tendo said, let's go to the temporal temple. After saying this, he and Lin Shao disappeared from the spot. Yang Lian was silent for a long time before he followed them. On the other side in the starry sky, a woman stood in front of Zhou Xian. At this moment Zhou Xian's bloodline power had been suppressed by her, but Zhou Xian had not woken up yet. At this moment Xue Tong appeared in front of the woman. She looked at her and asked, who are you? The woman Qingqing Yi clan ancestral shrine. Ancestors, Zhou Xian has no talent and no virtue. From this moment onwards, Zhou Xian's position as the crown prince will be replaced by Yi Lang. The person who spoke was an old man dressed in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a young man with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides of him were the Yi clan's elders. Why? At this moment, a timid voice suddenly sounded in the ancestral shrine. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Zhou Xian's biological sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Zhou Xian from his position, she rushed over despite her illness. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral shrine and said timidly, Great Elder, my brother Zhou Xian is the crown prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The Great Elder looked coldly at Yi Ling. This is a matter of the clan. Why are you interrupting? Leave. Yi Ling was obviously afraid and did not dare to look at the Great Elder. However, she did not leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage and walked into the ancestral shrine. Once again she bowed to the elders and said, Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan for the rights to the mine. He is fighting for the clan and his life is uncertain. But now the clan is using a groundless excuse to strip him of his position. This is really unfair. Impudent. The Great Elder suddenly raged. Whether or not he's crippled, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time the new crown prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. He should be flogged 30 times as a warning. The great elder replied coldly, then flog him 30 times. Very quickly 2 Yi clan's guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years. Even now he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new crown prince Yi Lang. He knew that his chance to shine had come. The guard sneered, "Young master Yi Lang inherits the crown prince's position. It's everyone's wish. What are you shouting for?" As he spoke he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly turned red and swollen. However, she didn't cry. She just clutched her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. "This subordinate Zhang Mu greets the crown prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the crown prince I'll need 10 personal guards. From now on you'll be my personal guard." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed deeply. This subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the crown prince, even if it means death. Yi Lang nodded. "Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Do not hold back. Understood?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the killing intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this time Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and he suddenly stopped. Within the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. He was wearing a tight-fitting robe that was tattered and covered in blood. This person was Zhou Xian, who had rushed back from the Nanshan. Seeing Zhou Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a cold smile. Inside the ancestral hall, all the elders frowned. The great elder's eyes narrowed and his face darkened. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Zhou Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Zhou Xian, his face changed. He hurriedly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time Zhou Xian was like a ferocious tiger, leaping in front of him. Before the latter could react, Zhou Xian's fist landed on his face. Bang! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop and he rushed towards Zhang Mu again. At this time Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped down on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced apart. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Ping! Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides there were the Yi clan elders. "Why?" At this time a timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian from his position, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall, and asked timidly, "Great elder, my brother Yi Xian is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason?" The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan, what are you interrupting for? Leave." Yi Ling was obviously afraid and did not dare to look at the great elder. However, she did not leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. Once again she bowed to the elders. "Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan for the rights to the mine. He is fighting for the clan and it is unknown whether he is dead or alive. Yet the clan is using a groundless excuse to strip him of his position. This is really unfair. Impudent. The great elder suddenly raged. Whether he's stripped or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time the new prince Yilang suddenly laughed. He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The great elder replied coldly, then flog him 30 times. Very quickly 2 Yi clan guards rushed in. Yiling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years and even now he is fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yilang. He knew that his chance to shine had come. The guard sneered, "Young master Yilang inherits the prince's position and it's everyone's wish. What are you shouting for?" As he spoke he raised his hand and slapped Yiling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yiling's face instantly turned red and swollen. However, she did not cry and only held her cheek tightly. Yilang looked at the guard and said with a smile, "What's your name?" The guard quickly bowed. "This subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince." Yilang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the prince I'll need 10 personal guards. From now on you'll be my personal guard." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and quickly bowed deeply. This subordinate is willing to go through water and tread on fire for the prince, even if it means death. Yilang nodded. "Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Do not hold back. Understood?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yilang and when he saw the killing intent in Yilang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yiling's hair and dragged her out. At this time Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and he suddenly stopped. Within the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. He was wearing a tight-fitting robe that was tattered and covered in blood. This person was Zhou Xian who had rushed back from the Nanshan. Seeing Zhou Xian, Yilang's lips curled into a cold smile. Inside the ancestral hall, all the elders frowned. The great elder's eyes narrowed and his face darkened. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Zhou Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yiling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Zhou Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yilang and was about to speak. At this time Zhou Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Zhou Xian's fist landed on his face. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. Yilang did not stop there and he charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time Yilang suddenly roared, "Zhou Xian, he's my man, how dare you!" Zhou Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yilang's face turned ugly, while Zhou Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Zhou Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yiling's side. Seeing Yiling's state, Zhou Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yiling saw Zhou Xian, tears welled up in her eyes. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Zhou Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Chapter 1911. Yang Lian and the other 2 had already rushed in front of Xiqian. 3 powerful forces charged towards Xiqian about to crush him. Xiqian's expression was calm, and his eyes were filled with disdain. At this moment Xiqian suddenly took a step forward and laughed. "Come, have a taste of my sword's sharpness." As he spoke, the profound qi in his body surged into the green profound sword like a tidal wave. In the next moment he slashed. A sword to the end. Xiqian was stunned. Because this sword did not have any strength. What was going on? Before Xiqian could think further, Yang Lian and the other 2's powerful forces drowned him. Rumble. Xiqian was sent flying tens of thousands of meters away. At this moment everyone was stunned. What was going on? Xiqian, who had stopped, had his body completely shattered. At this moment his eyes were lifeless and his mind was blank. After obtaining the green profound sword, he had been studying it with some scholars of the temporal temple, and had never used it personally. Therefore he did not know that he could not use this sword. On the other side, Yang Lian said solemnly, "That sword is strange." Xiao Tian nodded. At this moment, Zhou Xian, who was far away, suddenly swung the green profound sword fiercely. However, there was no strength in the green profound sword. Zhou Xian stopped and he understood. He could not use this sword at all. Thinking of this, Zhou Xian roared angrily, "Yi Xian." On the other side, Yang Lian said solemnly, "He has been tricked." At this moment, Zhou Xian suddenly threw the green profound sword in his hand towards Yang Lian and the other two. Zhou Xian stared at Yang Lian and the other two. "The sword is yours." Yang Lian remained silent. Zhou Xian sneered, "What, you want to destroy my temporal temple? Forgive me for being blunt, but even if you can destroy my temporal temple today, how many experts does your Dao Mountain have left? Moreover, that Yi Xian is still secretly happy." Yang Lian glanced at Zhou Xian, then kept the green profound sword. "Let's go." With that he turned and left. Dao Mountain and the other experts also left hurriedly. On the battlefield, Zhou Xian said fiercely, "Find that Yi Xian at all costs. Find him." Not long later, all the experts of the temporal temple began searching frantically for Yi Xian. Yang Lian and the others had stopped in the starry sky. Yang Lian glanced at the green profound sword in his hand and said, "I'm unable to utilize this sword." Lin Xiao asked solemnly, "Can't you use it?" Yang Lian nodded and then he passed the azure profound sword to Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao held the sword in his hand and a short moment later he frowned. "Looks like only Yi Xian can use this sword." "Yi Xian." Xiao Tian suddenly said, "Find this Yi Xian." Soon the experts of the Dao Mountain began searching for Yi Xian in a frenzy. Within the Xiaota, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. In front of him was a pile of soul crystals, which were currently being burned, and were constantly pouring power into his body. Gradually, a powerful aura emanated from Yi Xian's body. Breakthrough to the seamless realm. After a long time, Yi Xian opened his eyes. At this moment he had already absorbed 1,000,000 soul crystals. Xiaota suddenly asked, "Have you reached the seamless realm?" Yi Xian nodded. Now that he had reached the seamless realm, he was still unable to contend against Xiao Tian and the others. The difference in their realms was still too great. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly said, "Xiaota, tell me, how did Qing achieve 10 years in the pagoda, but 1 day outside?" Xiaota said, "I want to know, am I still a pagoda?" Yi Xian. Xiaota said, "Young lord, what are you trying to say?" Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "Space-time conversion." Xiaota was slightly puzzled. "Space-time conversion?" Yi Xian nodded. "The space-time inside the pagoda is different from the space-time outside. It should be said that the space-time inside the pagoda is higher than the space-time outside. Do you understand what I mean?" Xiaota said, "I don't understand." Yi Xian was speechless. He pondered for a moment, then said, 10 years in the pagoda, 1 day outside. This means that the space-time inside the pagoda is different from the space-time outside. Or in other words, the space-time inside the pagoda is of a higher grade than the space-time outside. Xiaota said in a deep voice, "Be more direct." Yi Xian said, "If I merge with you, is it equivalent to merging with this mysterious space-time created by Qing? Xiaota hesitated, then said, "Do you want to try?" Yi Xian nodded. "I think I can try, but I need your cooperation." Xiaota said in a deep voice, "Will it be dangerous?" Yi Xian said, "Probably not. Come Xiaota, let's merge again." Xiaota turned into a golden light and disappeared into Yi Xian's forehead. Bang! Yi Xian's entire body started to tremble violently, and his body gradually started to become illusory. Moreover, the space-time around him actually started to vanish bit by bit, and even the 9th layer of space-time started to vanish bit by bit. However, Yi Xian's face instantly turned pale, because he noticed that his body was slightly unable to endure the space-time within Xiaota. It didn't take long for Yi Xian to release Xiaota. He couldn't endure it. At this moment, his forehead was covered in sweat, and his entire body had split apart. Xiaota spoke in a low voice, "Young master, I don't think it's possible." Yi Xian shook his head, "It's possible. However, I can't endure it for too long." As he spoke, he sat down cross-legged and started to heal himself. 2 hours later, Yi Xian's injuries were more or less healed, and then he merged with Xiaota once more. To be more precise, he merged with the space-time within Xiaota. During those few breaths of time, Yi Xian hurriedly sensed the mysterious space-time. However, it was only for a few breaths of time. After a few breaths of time he had to start healing himself and then continue with the merging. Just like that, time passed by bit. Yi Xian tried again and again. After countless attempts he could finally borrow Xiao Ta's strength to merge with the mysterious space-time. However, he could only endure for 3 breaths of time. After 3 breaths of time he must separate from it. Otherwise his body would be directly destroyed. Moreover, he needed to borrow Xiao Ta's strength. After merging with the mysterious spacetime, Yi Xian began to try to use the mysterious spacetime. He tried many times and finally he could use the mysterious spacetime's pressure. This made Yi Xian extremely excited, because he realized that the mysterious spacetime's pressure could easily destroy the 9th layer of spacetime. In the following period of time, Yi Xian tried again and again. Unfortunately, he couldn't enter the mysterious spacetime's abyss, nor could he change the mysterious spacetime structure. Not only that, he couldn't even feel the mysterious spacetime's density. He could only use the mysterious spacetime's pressure. However, this was enough for him. Of course, even if he wanted to use the mysterious spacetime's pressure, he still needed to borrow Xiao Ta's strength. Simply put, if he threw out the pagoda now, even the 9th layer of spacetime could be easily destroyed. Yi Xian sighed. The Xiao Ta was finally useful. Without thinking too much, Yi Xian left Xiao Ta. As soon as he left Xiao Ta, the space in front of him shook violently. Yi Xian frowned slightly. So fast. At this time, a middle-aged man walked out from the space in front of him. The person who came was the Yang clan leader Yang Lian. Yang Lian stared at Yi Xian. I've been looking for you for so long. Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm and Xiao Ta appeared in his hand. In the next moment he tossed Xiao Ta out and Xiao Ta transformed into a golden ray of light. In the distance Yang Lian frowned slightly. In the next moment his expression changed drastically, and he suddenly put his palms together and pressed them forward. Bang! In an instant the first layer to the 8th layer of spacetime around him condensed into a spacetime wall. Xiao Ta arrived with a bang. Bang! The spacetime wall in front of Yang Lian shattered, and at the same time Yang Lian transformed into nothingness. Yi Xian was stunned when he saw this. Is it that terrifying? Before this he didn't know how strong the mysterious spacetime's pressure was. He only knew that it wasn't weak, but he hadn't expected it to be so strong. Instantly killing a life-soul realm expert, Yi Xian was extremely excited. Without thinking too much, Yi Xian put Xiao Ta away, turned around and ran. He could only use it once and he had to heal for 2 hours after using it, because the exhaustion was truly too great. Not long after Yi Xian vanished with Xiao Ta, Xiao Tian and Lin Xiao appeared here, and they remained silent as they gazed at the nearby spacetime hole. Yang Lian was gone. Lin Xiao spoke solemnly. It couldn't have been Yi Xian, right? Xiao Tian shook his head. He doesn't have that strength. It might have been the woman who saved him earlier. Lin Xiao's expression was quite solemn. Since he was able to kill Yang Lian without anyone noticing, then his strength. Xiao Tian's expression was quite unsightly. Lin Xiao spoke solemnly. Why don't we return the sword to him? Xiao Tian spoke fiercely. Will he let us go if we return it? He won't. We have irreconcilable enmity with him now, so he won't let us go even if we beg for mercy. Moreover, my Xiao clan can't bow and scrape to him. Lin Xiao spoke solemnly. My Lin clan can't do that either. Xiao Tian gazed into the distance with an icy cold expression. I'm going to the divine Dao nation. Lin Xiao frowned slightly. The divine Dao nation? Xiao Tian gazed at the green profound sword in his hand and said, I'm going to give this sword to the divine Dao nation. Doesn't Yi Xian have the ability to do so? He should go ask for it from the divine Dao nation. Lin Xiao hesitated for a moment and said, Are you really going to give it to them? Xiao Tian nodded. This sword is useless in our hands. Why don't we give it to the divine Dao nation and let that fellow Yi Xian become enemies with the divine Dao nation? As he spoke, he glanced at the surroundings and said, Let's go right now. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Lin Xiao hesitated for a moment and said, I'll go with you. As soon as he finished speaking, he hurriedly chased after Xiao Tian. Yang Lian's death had terrified both of them. After all, Yang Lian was in existence on the same level as them, yet he died soundlessly. In other words, the person standing behind Yi Xian could kill them soundlessly as well. At this moment they'd finally come back to their senses. On the other hand, the temporal temple was still searching madly for Yi Xian. 2 hours later, Yi Xian left Xiao Ta amidst the starry sky. He gazed at Xiao Ta in his hand and roared with laughter, "I'm finally invincible." Meanwhile, Xiao Ta said, "Young master, my intuition tells me that you won't last for more than 3 days before your enemies might advance again." Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 19:12. Yi Xian's face darkened when he heard Xiao Ta's words. Damn it, that's really possible. Right at this moment, a voice suddenly resounded from behind Yi Xian. "Young Master Yi." Yi Xian turned around and saw that space was torn apart a few hundred meters away, and then a middle-aged man walked out. It was the temporal temple's Yao Jun. Yi Xian was slightly taken aback when he saw Yao Jun, Elder Jun. Yao Jun glanced at the surroundings and said in a deep voice, "Young Master Yi, all the experts of the temporal temple are looking for you. It's best that you leave quickly." Yi Xian looked at Yao Jun and smiled. "Why are you helping me?" Yao Jun smiled bitterly. "Young Master Yi, don't ask so many questions. The temporal temple will find you in at most 10 minutes. At that time Yao Jun's face changed drastically. They're here. They're here. Young Master Yi, take care." After he finished speaking, he turned around and vanished on the spot. Right after Yao Jun left, the space a few hundred meters to the right of Yi Xian was torn apart, and a middle-aged man walked out. It was the temporal temple's temple master, Si Qian. A wisp of killing intent flashed in Si Qian's eyes when he saw Yi Xian. "Yi Xian. It's been so hard to find you." Yi Xian smiled. "Temple Master Si Qian, is my sword useful?" Si Qian's face instantly became ferocious. "Yi Xian. How dare you trick me? Die, old man." As he spoke, he was about to attack when Yi Xian suddenly smashed his pagoda forward. "Strike first and gain the upper hand." Si Qian's face changed drastically when he saw Yi Xian's pagoda smashing towards him. He didn't defend himself, but instead took a step forward and punched out. He used all his strength because he didn't dare underestimate Yi Xian. Moreover, he felt danger. This punch caused the entire starry sky to boil and then be annihilated. As Yi Xian's pagoda came crashing down, rumble. The space where Si Qian resided was directly shattered, and he instantly retreated explosively. As soon as he stopped moving, only his soul remained. Moreover, his soul was vanishing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Si Qian was stunned. In the distance, Yi Xian's face was also a little pale. The consumption of using Xiao Ta was too great. He could only use Xiao Ta once in a short period of time. Meanwhile, Si Qian suddenly spoke with a trembling voice. "Why?" Yi Xian looked at Si Qian. "What do you mean, why?" Si Qian asked crazily. "Why?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "Because I have backing." Si Qian's expression froze. His soul disappeared and he died. Meanwhile, countless experts of the temporal temple had appeared here, and their expressions instantly became extremely unsightly when they saw Si Qian perish. "The Hall Master has been killed by Yi Xian?" Yi Xian glanced at the experts of the temporal temple. "Are all of you going to attack me together?" All the experts of the temporal temple glanced at Yi Xian, and then they turned around and fled. Even the Hall Master had been instantly annihilated. How could they dare to continue fighting Yi Xian? Yi Xian didn't chase after those experts of the temporal temple. He was in an extremely bad state right now, and the important matter at hand was to recuperate. Yi Xian entered Xiao Ta and he'd basically recovered an hour later. After he left Xiao Ta, Yi Xian sensed the green profound sword, and it didn't take long for him to frown. Because the sword was quite far away from him. Where does that fellow from the Xiao clan intend to take it? Yi Xian frowned and he chased after it a short moment later. 3 days later, Yi Xian, who was riding his sword in space, suddenly stopped. Tens of thousands of meters in front of him stood a majestic city in space. Yi Xian walked in and he saw 3 big words above the city gate. Millennium City. After entering the city, Yi Xian was shocked. The city was very prosperous and the streets were dozens of meters wide. Tall buildings stood on both sides of the street, and it was densely packed, giving off a slightly oppressive feeling. There were all kinds of living beings walking on the streets. Their auras were powerful and most of them were life matrix cultivators. Yi Xian was somewhat speechless. Damn it! These life matrices were all over the place. At that moment, a carriage suddenly drove over from the end of the street. It wasn't 1 horse but 3. The horses were abnormally tall and they were several times taller than ordinary horses. They were covered in black scales and their hooves emitted blood-red flames. Everywhere they passed they left a trail of fire. As the saying went, there were sparks and lightning along the way and it was extremely dazzling. A woman sat in the carriage. She wore silver battle armor and her long silver hair was tied into a ponytail. She held a blood-red whip in her hand and when she waved it, thunder flashed. At that moment someone on the street exclaimed, "It's Princess Dao Ling." Following this exclamation, all the experts on both sides of the street stopped and bowed. Xian looked at the experts around him and he was somewhat shocked. What kind of princess was this woman? Could she be a princess of the divine Dao nation? Just as Xian was thinking, Princess Dao Ling's carriage suddenly stopped near Xian, and she looked down at Xian. "Why don't you bow?" Xian was slightly stunned and then he said, "I'm new here and I don't know the rules of this city. Please don't take offense." Dao Ling looked at Xian and after a moment she suddenly said, "Disrespecting the royal family and blaspheming the dignity of the royal family, execute him on the spot." With that, two mysterious experts suddenly appeared behind Xian, and two cold lights slashed at the back of Xian's neck. Xian narrowed his eyes and a cold glint flashed in his eyes. He opened his palm and a sword light suddenly flew out. The heads of the two mysterious experts flew into the air. All the experts present were shocked. This fellow dared to attack the royal family? Dao Ling sized up Xian. "You're a swordsman." Xian suddenly charged forward and slashed down with his sword. Dao Ling narrowed her eyes, and the blood whip in her hand suddenly swung down. Boom! A wave of sword light and blood light suddenly exploded, and Dao Ling was directly blasted thousands of meters away. Seeing this, the experts on both sides of the street changed their expressions, and they all turned and ran. Who is this Dao Ling? She was the favorite princess of the current divine Dao nation's king. Moreover, Dao Ling was the saintess of spiritual mountain. How noble was her identity. And now, someone was actually her opponent? In the distance, Dao Ling glanced at Xian. "Do you know what you're doing?" Xian was about to speak when a group of cavalrymen suddenly charged out from the distant street. There were more than 100 of them and all of them wore thick pitch-black armor and emitted a powerful murderous aura. The leader of the cavalrymen hurriedly came before Dao Ling and knelt on one knee. "This subordinate deserves to die for protecting your majesty late. Please forgive me, princess." Dao Ling said plainly, "Commander Chen, the one who deserves to die is not you but someone else." Commander Chen stood up and looked at Xian. With a wave of his right hand the cavalryman charged at Xian. At this moment Xian opened his palm and a sword light suddenly flew out. In an instant the heads of all the cavalrymen flew out, and 100 streams of blood shot into the sky like a fountain. It was extremely bloody. Commander Chen's expression changed drastically at the sight of this and he hurriedly said, "Princess, you leave first." There was a hint of seriousness in Dao Ling's eyes. She stared at Xian and asked, "Do you know what you're doing?" Xian smiled. "Are you trying to say that you have a backer?" Dao Ling looked at Xian. "You're provoking the Dao God Nation and Spirit Mountain. And you'll pay the most painful price for this." Xian was slightly puzzled. "You provoked me first, didn't you?" Dao Ling was expressionless. "You don't respect the imperial family so you deserve to die." Xian sneered. "What a joke. I was born with an unyielding character. Why would I bow down to a woman like you?" As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly charged forward and slashed with his sword. Drawing a sword to decide life and death. The moment the sword slashed down, a powerful force of sword Dao instantly shattered the spacetime in front of him. Dao Ling's expression changed drastically. She waved her right hand, and the blood whip in her hand swept across with a powerful bolt of blood lightning. Padung. Boom. The blood light suddenly shattered and the blood whip in Dao Ling's hand shattered. At the same time she was instantly sent flying out of the city. As soon as she stopped, a flying sword suddenly slashed at her. Dao Ling's pupils suddenly shrank. At this moment she smelled the scent of death. But at this critical moment, a shadow suddenly appeared above her head. The next moment Xian's flying sword stopped. Seeing this scene, the cavalry commander nearby was so frightened that he collapsed to the ground. If Dao Ling died here then they would be in big trouble. In the distance Xian looked at the shadow above Dao Ling's head. The shadow was very blurry and its true appearance could not be seen clearly. However, it was not the real body but a wisp of shadow. At this moment, Dao Ling bowed slightly. Master. A powerhouse of Spirit Mountain. The shadow looked at Zhou Xian. You have such a high level of sword Dao cultivation at such a young age. Who are you? Zhou Xian shook his head. An outsider who has just arrived. The shadow frowned slightly. Just arrived. Zhou Xian pointed at Dao Ling not far away. I just arrived and don't know the rules here. Your disciple saw that I did not bow to her and wanted to kill me. Do you think this? The shadow suddenly said. You did not bow to her and she wanted to kill you. What's wrong with that? Zhou Xian was struck dumb. Then he smiled and said, Why should I bow to her? The shadow looked straight at Zhou Xian. Don't you know that she is the princess of the divine Dao nation and the holy lady of Spirit Mountain? Zhou Xian frowned slightly. Just because of that I should bow to her? The shadow looked at Zhou Xian for a moment and said, Why don't you bow to her? A sinister look flashed in Zhou Xian's eyes. The princess of the divine Dao nation? The holy lady of Spirit Mountain? My father is invincible, my brother is invincible, and my sister is invincible. Am I proud? **CK. As he spoke, he opened his palm and Xiao Ta appeared in his hand. In the next moment he suddenly threw him. Boom. The shadow was directly smashed into nothingness by Xiao Ta. At the same time, Dao Ling's physical body was directly shattered by the powerful shockwave, leaving only her soul. Peace. I was too busy returning to my hometown. I'm afraid of losing my roots. Don't mind if I lose my roots. Forgive me. Chapter 1913. Seeing this scene, the expressions of many experts in the dark changed. Who is this guy? How dare he not give face to the divine Dao nation and spiritual mountain? Does he want to die? Dao Ling was also a little dumbfounded at this moment. This guy actually erased his master's virtual image? Most importantly, this guy didn't give face to the divine Dao nation and spiritual mountain. This was the first time she encountered someone who didn't give her face. Dao Ling stared at Zhou Xian with a gaze that was like a sword, as if it wanted to pierce through Zhou Xian. Do you know what you're doing? Zhou Xian didn't waste any words. He suddenly appeared in front of Dao Ling and slashed with his sword. A sword light flashed and Dao Ling's soul was directly erased. Completely erased. She didn't even have a chance to reincarnate. The experts in the dark gasped when they saw this scene. He really killed her. And he did it so ruthlessly, directly erasing her without even giving her a chance to reincarnate. This was equivalent to slapping the divine Dao nation and spiritual mountain in the face. Who is this young man? On the other side, Commander Chen's face was extremely pale, and his entire body was trembling. Princess Dao Ling was killed just like that. After killing Dao Ling, Zhou Xian turned and left. At this moment Xiao Ta suddenly said, Young master, why can't you endure it? Now that you've killed her, endless trouble will come again. Zhou Xian said plainly, I'm not a tortoise. Why should I endure it? Xiao Ta sighed softly, then you'll have two super enemies, the divine Dao nation and spiritual mountain. Zhou Xian smiled. What can I do? You saw it too. Zhou Xian didn't bully anyone. She bullied me first. Xiao Ta was silent. Zhou Xian continued, Yes, if I had bowed and saluted, there might not have been all this trouble. But Xiao Ta, why should we bow to her? Just because she's the divine Dao nation's princess? The saintess of Mount Lingshan? I don't care so much. I only know that if people don't offend me, I won't offend them. If people offend me, I'll definitely offend them. Xiao Ta said, I know what you mean and I also know that you have a backbone. How do you plan to deal with the spiritual mountain and the divine Dao nation next? Zhou Xian shrugged. If we can win, we fight. If we can't, we run. What else can we do? Xiao Ta said, Then why didn't you run? Zhou Xian's expression changed slightly. Someone's here. Xiao Ta asked, Can't you feel it? The corner of Zhou Xian's mouth twitched. Feel my ass. As he spoke, he rode his sword and disappeared into the horizon in the blink of an eye. Not long after Zhou Xian disappeared, a beautiful woman suddenly appeared on the scene. The beautiful woman glanced downwards with a gloomy expression. She was Dao Ling's master, the Grand Elder of Spirited Mountain Lan Ling. After a short moment, Lan Ling turned around and left. Pass down my order. Find this person at all costs. The divine Dao nation. The Divine Dao Nation was located in the Divine Dao Star region. In the past, the Divine Dao Star region was extremely chaotic, and there were hundreds of thousands of forces of various sizes. But in the end, a divine emperor appeared in the Divine Dao Star region, and he unified the entire Divine Dao Star region in a short 100 years. He established an unprecedented superforce, the Divine Dao Nation. A woman walked slowly in a hall in the Divine Dao Nation's imperial palace. She held a thick ancient book in her hand. The woman read very seriously, and the corners of her mouth curled up from time to time into a charming smile. The woman wore a wide white dress, and there was a soaring purple phoenix at the end of the dress. The phoenix's eyes were sharp as it looked down upon the world. The woman was the current king of the Divine Dao Nation, Xin Dao Ling. She was known as the most powerful woman in the universe. Right at this moment, an old man walked to the entrance of the hall. When he saw Xin Dao Ling reading, the old man's right foot that was about to step into the hall stopped in midair. He hesitated for a moment before walking in the end. At this moment, Xin Dao Ling put down the book in her hand and turned to look at the old man. She smiled. What happened? The old man bowed slightly. Your Majesty, Princess Ling is dead. Xin Dao Ling. Xin Dao Ling walked slowly to the entrance of the hall with a calm expression. Who killed her? The old man said, a youth of unknown origin. Xin Dao Ling smiled. Unknown origin? The old man nodded. Unknown origin. We only know that the other party is a swordsman. Moreover, the other party is only at the Seamless Realm. Xin Dao Ling blinked. And Seamless Realm cultivator killed Ling Er, who has already reached the life-body realm? The old man nodded. Xin Dao Ling smiled. Interesting. The old man bowed slightly. Your Majesty, I have already sent the Imperial Spirit Divine Guards to capture this person. Do you want him dead or alive? Shinto Ling chuckled and said, Lord Musa, a young man at the Seamless Realm was able to kill someone at the Life Physique Realm. Moreover, the other party was someone who knew Linger's identity, yet he still dared to kill her. Do you think he's an ordinary person? Musa's expression was calm. No matter where he came from, since he dared to kill Princess Ling, he is looking down on our Divine Dao Nation. He should have his entire family executed. Xin Dao Ling smiled. Spiritual Mountain is already searching for this person? Musa nodded. Xin Dao Ling said, then wait for now and watch Spiritual Mountain's performance first. Musa glanced at Xin Dao Ling and nodded. I understand. After saying that, he paused and said, Your Majesty, Dao Mountain's Shao clan leader requests an audience, saying that he has a divine item to offer to Your Majesty. Xin Dao Ling frowned slightly. Dao Mountain? Musa nodded. A very remote starfield. Because there is no value there, it is not within our Divine Dao Nation's territory. Xin Dao Ling asked. He said he has a divine item to give me? Musa nodded. Also, he wants to give it to Your Majesty in person. Xin Dao Ling smiled. Interesting, let him see me. Musa nodded and then he left. It didn't take long for Xiao Tian and Lin Xiao to arrive before the hall. They were just about to raise their heads to look at the divine Dao plume when an invisible pressure enveloped them, causing their expressions to change drastically, and they hurriedly lowered their heads. At the same time, they were astounded to the extreme. They were life-soul realm cultivators. Yet this woman could suppress them with just an aura. How terrifying was that? Xin Dao Ling sat down at the side and smiled. You want to give me a divine item? Xiao Tian hurriedly said, yes. As he spoke, he opened his palm and the green profound sword floated over to Xin Dao Ling. The smile on Xin Dao Ling's face instantly vanished when she laid eyes on the sword. It was replaced by a solemn expression. Meanwhile, Xiao Tian hurriedly said, Your Majesty, we obtained this by chance. The knowledge of time and space contained within this sword far exceeds our understanding. So we've specially offered this sword to Your Majesty. Xin Dao Ling held the sword and looked at it for a short while before she gazed at Xiao Tian. Where did you obtain this sword? Xiao Tian hesitated for a moment and was about to speak when Xin Dao Ling said, I'll only give you one chance to speak. Think it through. Xiao Tian was shocked and did not dare to play any more tricks. He immediately said, The two of us obtained it from a young man. Xin Dao Ling frowned slightly. A young man? Xiao Tian hurriedly nodded. Yes. Xin Dao Ling said, Tell me about that young man. Xiao Tian didn't understand, but he didn't dare refuse, so he immediately told her about Zhou Xian. At the side, Musa furrowed his brows. Shen Daoling gazed at Musa and the latter nodded. It should be that young man. Shen Daoling chuckled. Interesting. As she spoke, she glanced at Xiao Tian and Lin Xiao. I really like this sword. What reward do the two of you want? Both of them were overjoyed when they heard this, and Xiao Tian hurriedly said, It's good that you like it, Your Majesty. As for the reward, Your Majesty, feel free to do as you please. Shen Daoling gazed at Musa. Take them away and entertain them well. Musa glanced at Shen Daoling and nodded slightly. Understood. As he spoke, he gazed at Xiao Tian and Lin Xiao. Come with me. Xiao Tian and Lin Xiao hurriedly bowed respectfully to Shen Daoling, and then they turned around and left with Musa. Within the hall, Shen Daoling gazed at the green profound sword in her hand and clearly fell silent. The green profound sword. In next to no time, Musa appeared within the hall and she spoke in a low voice. Your Majesty, this sword? Shen Daoling handed the green profound sword to Musa. Take a look at it. Musa glanced at the green profound sword before him and his expression became solemn. This sword. Shen Daoling said, Summon the palace master of the Shengong Palace, Mu Qiao. Musa immediately turned around and left. A few moments later, Musa brought a white-haired old man into the hall. This person was the palace master of the Shengong Palace, Mu Qiao, and he was responsible for the forging of the weapons of the entire Divine Dao nation. Mu Qiao bowed respectfully to Shen Daoling. Your Majesty. Shen Daoling pointed with a finger, and the green profound sword landed before Mu Qiao. Take a look at this sword. Mu Qiao picked up the green profound sword and sized it up. Moments later, his expression became solemn. This sword. May I ask Your Majesty, where did you get this sword from? Shen Daoling asked. Can you forge this sword? Mu Qiao glanced at the green profound sword and hesitated for a moment before he said, This? Compared to the person who forged this sword, I might still be a little lacking. A little. Shen Daoling said calmly, Then you can't. Mu Qiao hurriedly said, If Your Majesty is willing to let me study this sword for half a year, I'll definitely be able to forge a divine item that surpasses this sword. Shen Daoling shook her head, You can't. Mu Qiao was quite confused. Why not? Shen Daoling looked at the green profound sword in his hand and said softly, The Tao of space and time contained within this sword is unfamiliar to even me. Mu Qiao hurriedly said, Your Majesty, let me study this sword for a month. In a month I'll definitely be able to forge a sword that surpasses this sword. Shen Daoling suddenly said, If you can't, you can resign and go home to retire, is that all right? Mu Qiao's expression froze and he bowed slightly moments later. Your Majesty, the old man still has matters to attend to, so I'll be taking my leave. After saying that, he turned around and left. Shen Daoling shook her head and looked at Musa. Investigate this person's background. Musa nodded before turning around and leaving. Within the palace, Shen Daoling looked at the green profound sword in his hand, and after a short while she grinned. I know you have a spirit, so I won't ask anything else. I just want to ask a question. What grade of sword do you belong to? Soul fell silent for a moment before saying, There's no grade. I'm invincible below 3 swords. Chapter 1914. Under 3 strikes? The divine Daoling smiled. Which 3 strikes? Soul replied, Big brother, young master's father, and young master's younger sister. The divine Daoling's eyes narrowed slightly. Young master? Soul replied, Yes. The divine Daoling suddenly turned around. Guards. Meanwhile, a man in black armor who carried a huge saber on his back walked in. The divine Daoling said, Send my decree. Tell the spirit mountain not to make things difficult for that young man. The armored man bowed slightly, turned around and left. The divine Daoling's expression gradually turned solemn as he gazed at the green profound sword in his grasp. Xian walked slowly through an unknown mountain range. His destination was the divine Dao nation's capital because he sensed that the green profound sword was there. At this moment, the space in front of him suddenly trembled. Xian's expression was calm. The reason he hadn't flown on his sword was because he wanted to avoid some trouble. He hadn't expected that they would be able to find him just by walking. Since it was like that, then it was over. At this moment, a woman suddenly walked out from the crack in space. It was the Spirit Mountain's Grand Elder Lan Ling. Lan Ling gazed at Xian. Since you dared to disregard my Spirit Mountain and the Divine Dao Nation, then I presume your background isn't simple. However, I'm very curious about the power behind you. Yi Xian smiled. There's no enmity between me and the Spirit Mountain, and I have no intention of offending it. It was your holy maiden who wanted to kill me first. You. Lan Ling shook her head. I didn't come here to listen to you. When she spoke up to this point, she walked slowly towards Yi Xian. The strong have no need to listen to the weak. Understand? Yi Xian suddenly tossed. Bang. A ray of golden light suddenly flashed across the battlefield. Lan Ling's expression instantly changed drastically. She opened her right hand and a golden shield suddenly appeared in front of her. Bang. The golden round shield shattered, and Lan Ling's physical body was crushed along with it. Lan Ling, who only had her soul left, was stunned. At this moment, a sword suddenly pressed against Lan Ling's forehead. Lan Ling's expression changed drastically. If you dare touch me, the spiritual mountain will slaughter your entire sect. Yi Xian blinked. If you want to slaughter me, I'm a little afraid, but if you want to slaughter my entire family. At this point he said seriously, don't stand on ceremony. Quickly go slaughter them, especially my father. You're welcome to go find him. Don't hold back, use all your strength to beat him up. Lan Ling glared at Yi Xian. I underestimated you. Now we can talk. Yi Xian was so angry that he laughed. I want to reason with you, but you want to talk to me with your fists. I want to talk to you with my fists, but you want to reason with me. I'm not your father. Why should I spoil you? As he spoke, he suddenly punched out. Boom. Lan Ling was blasted into nothingness by the punch. Completely erased. Right at this moment, an extremely terrifying aura suddenly swept down from the distant horizon. In next to no time, the horizon split open and a middle-aged man walked out from within. Mount Master of the Spiritual Mountain, Emolian. Along with Emolian's appearance, dozens of spiritual mountain powerhouses appeared. Among them there were a total of 12 Life Soul Realm powerhouses. They were surrounded. Yi Xian's expression was calm. Xiaota suddenly said, Young lord, it was a moment of pleasure to kill. How are you going to clean up now? Yi Xian said calmly, What can I do? If it were you, Xiaota, would you take it lying down? Xiaota said, Young lord, I've never seen you so unyielding towards master. Yi Xian said, That's my father. Isn't it only right and proper for me to give in to him? If he wasn't my father, I would've. Xiaota said calmly, What do you mean by that? Young lord, you sound like you can beat master. Yi Xian shook his head. Xiaota, how did father tolerate you until now? Xiaota. At this moment Emolian suddenly said, You killed our holy maiden and grand elder of Spiritual Mountain. How dare you? Yi Xian was about to speak, but Emolian suddenly said, Kill. As soon as he finished speaking, he flipped his palm. In an instant the space around Yi Xian suddenly transformed into a cage, and the experts from the Spiritual Mountain were about to attack. However, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared here. The middle-aged man wore black armor and carried a large saber on his back. Seeing him, Emolian frowned. Lord Enzua? Enzua said, His Majesty has decreed that all powerhouses of Spiritual Mountain return immediately. Return immediately. Hearing this, Emolian frowned. Return immediately? Lord Enzua, what does His Majesty mean? Enzua looked at Emolian. Return. Emolian pointed at Yi Xian angrily. Lord Enzua, this person killed Princess Lingyu. Enzua said, Return immediately. Emolian's expression was somewhat ugly. Enzua suddenly pulled out the large saber on his back and slashed forward. Emolian's expression changed drastically and he blocked with his arm. Boom. Emolian instantly retreated tens of thousands of feet and spacetime was destroyed. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's eyelids twitched. This guy is a bit fierce. That saber just now actually shook the 9th layer of spacetime. In the distance, Emolian's expression was extremely ugly. Of course it was mostly fear. Enzua looked coldly at Emolian. Return to the mountain. This is the last warning. Emolian glanced at Yi Xian beside him, then turned around and left. He was not afraid of Enzua, but behind Enzua was the woman who represented Divine Dao Nation. After Emolian and the powerhouses of Spiritual Mountain left, Enzua turned to look at Yi Xian. His Majesty requests an audience. Yi Xian asked, the ruler of Divine Dao Nation. Enzua nodded. Yi Xian hesitated, then said, Can I not go? Enzua suddenly pulled out the large saber on his back. Xian hurriedly said, "Go. Let's go now." Zhou nodded. "Please." Xian felt somewhat helpless. On the way Xian looked at Zhou. "Why is His Majesty looking for me?" Zhou shook her head. "I don't know." Xian asked again, "Is His Majesty angry that I killed your Princess Ling?" Zhou shook her head again. "I don't know." Xian thought about it and asked again, "Your Majesty?" Zhou looked at Xian. "Young master, I don't know anything. Even if I knew I wouldn't tell you. Can you be quiet?" Xian. After Xian and Zhou left, Lian watched Xian and Zhou disappear into the distance and said, "This person probably has a backer in Divine Dao Nation. Someone is protecting him." A spiritual mountain powerhouse said, "Then what should we do? Our first elder and saint is going to die in vain?" After a moment of silence, Lian said, "Didn't the divine marquis's grandson Wenren like the saintess? Now that the saintess has been killed, he can't sit back and do nothing. Inform Wenren immediately. Also, use all the connections of spiritual mountain and divine Dao Nation to kill this person." The spiritual mountain elder nodded. "Understood." Lian looked at the horizon in the distance and then turned to leave. 1 hour later, Xian and Zhou arrived at the Divine Dao Nation's imperial capital. When they arrived at the gates of the Divine Dao Nation's imperial capital, Xian was somewhat surprised. This Divine Dao Nation's imperial capital was not big, or rather it was a little small. At this moment Zhou said, "Young master, remember no fighting is allowed in the city." Xian asked, "What if someone provokes me?" Zhou glanced at Xian. "In any case, no fighting." Xian continued to ask, "What if someone hits me first?" Zhou looked at Xian. "Young master Yi, who would hit you for no reason?" Xian asked, "What if?" Zhou said, "Young master Yi, no one would take the initiative to hit you." At this moment, a young man suddenly walked over from the street in the distance. This young man was wearing an embroidered robe and had a sword at his waist. He held a folding fan in his hand. With one look, one could tell that he was a distinguished young master. Seeing this young man, Zhou hesitated for a moment and then bowed slightly. "Greetings, young Marquis." "Young Marquis Wenren." Wenren ignored Zhou and looked at Xian. "Why didn't you kneel and greet this Marquis?" Xian pulled on Zhou's sleeve. "Didn't you say that no one would come looking for trouble with me?" Zhou. At this moment Wenren smiled and said, "Not greeting this Marquis is looking down on etiquette, the Divine Marquis residence and the Divine Dao Nation." With that he looked at Zhou. "Lord Zhou and Lu, how should we deal with this person?" Zhou said in a low voice, "Young Marquis, His Majesty has summoned him." Wenren smiled. "Did I stop him from seeing His Majesty? What I'm saying is that this person didn't greet me. He has violated the laws of the Divine Dao Nation." Zhou frowned when he heard this. How could he not discern that Wenren had come to cause trouble on purpose? Zhou hesitated for a moment and then looked at Xian. "Young Master Yi," Xian blinked. "You wouldn't want me to greet him, right?" Zhou said, "Just greet him." Wenren looked at Xian and lightly tapped the folding fan in his hand. He smiled but didn't say anything. Xian smiled. He said that the people of the Divine Dao Nation must greet him, but I don't seem to be from the Divine Dao Nation. Wenren suddenly smiled. "But you're standing on the territory of my Divine Dao Nation. Since you're standing on the territory of my Divine Dao Nation, then you should obey the laws of my Divine Dao Nation." Xian gazed at Wenren and smiled. "Young master, there's no enmity between us, right?" Wenren walked over to Xian and grinned. "Don't we have one now?" Xian smiled. "The last person who asked me to greet her seemed to be called a Divine Dao Spirit. Right, she's completely vanished from this world now." Wenren expression instantly turned cold. He took 2 more steps forward and smiled. "Come. Hit me." Provocation. Xian suddenly withdrew Xiao Ta and smashed it down. Bang. Wenren wasn't even able to react before he was smashed into pieces by Xiao Ta. Everyone here was stunned when they witnessed this scene. Even Zhou hadn't expected that Xian would suddenly attack, and he hadn't even been able to stop Xian in time. Xian opened his palm and Xiao Ta returned to his grasp. He glanced at the spatial black hole that Xiao Ta had created. "Hit you? I'll fucking kill you." As he spoke, he gazed at Zhou and spoke furiously. "I hate second-generation disciples that rely on their fathers and ancestors the most. How embarrassing. If everyone was like me, Yi Xian. Meanwhile, Xiao Ta suddenly said, young master, that's enough. I'm very embarrassed. You're the strongest second-generation disciple in the world, so what's there to say? Yi Xian was speechless. P.S. It's the new year tomorrow, so I don't have time to write. What should I do? I haven't stopped writing for an entire year, so I can apply for leave. Brothers. Chapter 1915. Following Wenren Yu's death, the entire street became quiet. Wenren Yu. That was the Divine Marquis Young Duke. What kind of existence was the Divine Marquis Manor? The Divine Marquis Manor's ancestor was one of the founding fathers who followed the Divine Emperor to conquer the world. In order to reward the Divine Marquis Manor's ancestor Wenren Tian, the Divine Emperor personally decreed that as long as the descendants of the Wenren clan did not rebel, they would be exempted from death. But now, someone actually killed the Wenren clan's young duke. Moreover, this young duke was the Wenren clan's only son. Things were getting out of hand. Next to Yi Xian, Anzua's expression was also extremely ugly. Damn it. Why did this guy dare to kill anyone? Was he crazy? At this time Yi Xian suddenly said, Lord Anzua, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and bring me to your emperor. Anzua said solemnly, young Master Yi, things are getting out of hand. Yi Xian said, that's why we have to hurry up and see your emperor. Right now only your emperor can protect me, right? Anzua was speechless. You still know who can protect you. Without further thought, Anzua brought Yi Xian to the palace. He also knew that only his emperor could solve this problem. He was a little afraid of Yi Xian now. This guy was also a tiger. He dared to kill without a word regardless of who the other party was. Tiger. The two of them had only taken a few steps when a hunchbacked old man suddenly appeared in front of them. Behind this hunchbacked old man stood 10 experts in dark armor. The Wenren clan. Seeing this hunchbacked old man, Anzua hesitated, then bowed slightly. Lord Yu Xian. Yu Xian. The Wenren clan's housekeeper. However, this was not an ordinary housekeeper. He was once a commander of the imperial army. After leaving the palace, he became a housekeeper at the Divine Marquis Manor. Yu Xian glanced at Anzua, then at Yi Xian. Without any nonsense, he charged forward and threw a punch at Yi Xian. This punch seemed to contain the stampede of a magnificent army, and a monstrous momentum instantly enveloped Yi Xian. Yi Xian did not retreat. Instead, he took a step forward, drew his sword and slashed. Boom! A sword light shattered, and Yi Xian instantly retreated several thousand feet away. Yu Xian suddenly tapped the ground with the tip of his foot, and he was like a ferocious tiger that had left its cage as he punched straight at Yi Xian. This punch caused the surrounding space to distort and transform into a space-time vortex. In the distance, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and took a step forward. In an instant, a wave of sword light engulfed him and Yu Xian. Boom! The ground shook violently and the sword light shattered. Yi Xian retreated another 100 feet. After Yu Xian stopped, he was about to attack again. In the distance, Yi Xian opened his palm and Xiao Ta appeared in his hand. Just as he was about to activate Xiao Ta again, an old man suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Seeing this person, Anzua heaved a sigh of relief. Musa. This person was the current divine minister, Musa. In the Shinto nation he had great prestige and power. Seeing Musa, Yu Xian did not attack again. Instead he bowed slightly. Lord Divine Minister. Musa turned to look at Yi Xian, then at Yu Xian. His Majesty has summoned him. Anything can wait until His Majesty has met him. Yu Xian said solemnly, Lord Divine Minister, young Master Yu is dead. Musa frowned. I told you. His Majesty has summoned him. Yu Xian's face turned ugly. Right at this moment, a cough suddenly sounded from afar. Everyone looked over and saw a beautiful woman walking over slowly from afar. Musa's face darkened when he saw this beautiful woman. Yu Xian and the rest quickly went over and knelt down. Greetings, mistress. Situ Jing of the Divine Marquis Mansion was the current ruler of the Divine Marquis Mansion. Situ Jing walked slowly to Musa. Musa hesitated for a while, then bowed slightly. Old man. Situ Jing chuckled. I know that the Divine Marquis Mansion is not the same as before. In terms of power, we are indeed no match for you, Lord Divine Minister. However, the Divine Marquis Mansion is not a place that can be easily bullied. Then she lightly tapped the walking stick in her right hand. Boom. The ground cracked, and in the next moment hundreds of shadows suddenly rushed out from all directions. Divine Marquee Guards. Musa's face darkened. These Divine Marquee Guards were the bodyguards of the Divine Marquee Mansion. Even the weakest among them was at the Divine Physique echelon. At this moment, a group of mysterious experts suddenly appeared beside Musa. There were only 16 of them, but they were all at the Divine Soul echelon. And these were Musa's own bodyguards. The atmosphere and the surroundings instantly became tense. Situ Jing looked at Musa. Lord Divine Minister, the Divine Marquee Mansion has no enmity with you, and we have never thought of becoming enemies with you. Today the Divine Marquee Mansion only wants to seek justice. Musa shook his head. Old man, he is the person that His Majesty wants to see. Situ Jing glanced at Zhou Xian. Why does His Majesty want to see him? Musa shook his head. I don't know. Situ Jing stared at Musa. He killed you, heir. Musa said in a low voice. Old man, let His Majesty meet him first. How about that? Situ Jing was silent. Around them, the experts from the Divine Marquee Mansion stared at Zhou Xian. As soon as Situ Jing gave the order, they would swarm him. At this moment, Situ Jing suddenly said, since His Majesty wants to see him, then let His Majesty meet him first. Hearing this, Musa relaxed a little. He nodded and turned to Zhou Xian. Young Master Yi, please. Then he turned and left. Zhou Xian sheathed his sword and followed him. At this moment, Situ Jing suddenly said, Young man. Zhou Xian turned to look at Situ Jing. Situ Jing stared at Zhou Xian. No matter how powerful you are, the Divine Marquee Mansion must take your head. Zhou Xian walked to Situ Jing. At this moment, Musa frowned. Young Master Yi, don't do anything rash. Zhou Xian suddenly laughed. Lord Musa, didn't you see that she was the one who threatened me first? Musa's expression was cold. Young Master Yi, if you do anything rash, no one can protect you. Zhou Xian laughed. Rash? What a joke. The moment I entered this city, the Divine Marquee Mansion came to bully me. Why? Only the Divine Marquee Mansion can bully others but others can't? Or is it that the law of God country only bullies the weak and fears the strong? Musa stared at Zhou Xian. Young Master Yi, be careful with your words. Zhou Xian smiled. All right. I will be careful. Lord Musa, let's go. Let's go and meet your Majesty. After saying that, he walked into the distance. Musa glanced at Zhou Xian and followed. After Zhou Xian and Musa disappeared, Situ Jing suddenly said, pass down my order. Spread the news that this person killed Princess Ling and you. Zhou Xian nodded. Understood. As he spoke, his expression became slightly solemn. He knew that old madam wanted to control the public opinion first. But why did he want to control the public opinion? Because this person was not simple. At this moment, Situ Jing asked again, why did you suddenly find trouble with this person? An expert from the Divine Marquee Constabulary said in a low voice, Old madam, someone informed young master that Princess Ling was killed by that young man. That's why young master came to find this young man. Situ Jing's expression darkened. Spiritual mountain, right? That expert nodded. Situ Jing slowly closed his eyes. His expression was extremely cold. Spiritual mountain, how dare you use the Divine Marquee Mansion? She knew that the Divine Marquee Mansion was being used by the spiritual mountain. That expert said, Old man, I'm afraid that young man's background is not simple. Situ Jing was expressionless. How can someone who dares to kill the Princess of God country be simple? However, no matter who he is, the Divine Marquee Mansion will take his head as an offering to you, soul in heaven. Then she turned and left. Soon the entire Divine Marquee Mansion began to move. The Divine Marquee Mansion's influence in God country was not to be trifled with. Before long, countless officials of God country had already left for the palace, ready to make a statement. At this moment, Zhou Xian and Musa arrived at the entrance of the palace. Musa turned to Zhou Xian. Young Master Yi, do you know etiquette? Zhou Xian smiled. Are you trying to say that I should bow when I see His Majesty? Musa said in a low voice, Young Master Yi, only His Majesty can protect you. Zhou Xian suddenly said, My sword is in His Majesty's hands, right? He could already feel the profound green sword. It was in this palace. Musa nodded. Yes. Zhou Xian smiled and walked into the palace. There was only one woman in the palace. It was the divine Dao Ling. Seeing Zhou Xian enter, The divine Dao Ling put down a memorial in her hand and smiled as she pointed at the memorials in front of her. There are a total of 1280 memorials, and all of them request for your immediate death. As she spoke, she slowly walked in front of Yi Xian and looked straight at Yi Xian. Little fella, I know that you are not simple, but you are too ruthless. First, you killed a princess of God country, then you killed the little marquis of the divine marquis mansion. Furthermore, you did not leave any leeway. Even if I wanted to protect you, I would not be able to. Yi Xian said with a smile, I have never provoked any of your people. The divine Dao Ling blinked. Is that important? It is not. You should understand that reason is built on your fist. If you do not have the strength, you will only be humiliating yourself by trying to reason with me. Yi Xian smiled. I understand. The divine Dao Ling smiled. Then tell me, how will you live? Yi Xian said with a smile, you should know better than me, don't you? The divine Dao Ling opened her palm and the profound green sword appeared in her hand. She looked at Yi Xian and smiled. Who is the person who forged this sword? Yi Xian answered honestly, Pai's sister. Sister? The divine Dao Ling's lips curled up. She is the person behind you and the reason why you are so unyielding, right? Yi Xian looked at the divine Dao Ling. What do you want? The divine Dao Ling smiled. Young Master Yi, whether you can live or not depends on how strong the person who forged this sword is. As she spoke, she exerted force in her right hand and a mysterious force suddenly surged into the profound green sword. Boom! The profound green sword trembled. At the same time, the space before her warped. A few moments later, the divine Dao Ling looked up. A few breaths later, the corners of her mouth curled up. Young Master Yi, I can sense the person who forged this sword. As soon as she finished speaking, her body suddenly became illusory. In the next moment, her illusory figure passed through countless spaces and arrived at an unknown starry sky. Not far away from her, a woman in a plain dress stood quietly. Not far from her, over 10,000 mysterious experts were kneeling on the ground. Not only were they kneeling, but their bodies were also trembling and their faces were filled with terror. At this moment, the woman turned around and looked at the divine Dao Ling. What's the matter? The divine Dao Ling smiled. I am the ruler of the divine Dao nation. Your brother's life and death are in my hands. The divine Dao nation? The woman raised her brows. She opened her right hand and the walking sword appeared in her hand. Point me in a direction. P.S. A reader's birthday requested an extra chapter. I couldn't refuse. Chapter 1916. Where was the nation of divine Dao? Hearing the woman's words, the faces of the mysterious experts behind her instantly changed. All the experts immediately crawled down and their bodies trembled violently. They were terrified to the extreme. Over 100 kilometers behind them was pitch black, and even the 10th layer of space had been obliterated. That place was originally their home. 15 minutes ago, the woman in a plain dress had asked them the same question, and 15 minutes later, their home was gone. The divine Dao Ling looked at the woman in a plain dress. Where is my home? The woman in a plain dress shook her head. There's no need for you to point. As she spoke, the walk sword in her hand suddenly flew out. The divine Dao Ling's pupils constricted when she saw the woman in a plain dress attack. Even though it was only an illusion, she didn't underestimate her opponent. When she was about to attack, that seemingly slow sword suddenly stabbed into the space between her brows. Bang! The divine Dao Ling's body instantly became illusory. The divine Dao Ling looked at the woman in a plain dress. I underestimated you. As soon as she finished speaking, her pupils constricted. In the nation of divine Dao, within the imperial palace, a sword stabbed into the space between the divine Dao Ling's brows without any warning. The divine Dao Ling's eyes were wide open, and they were filled with disbelief. How is this possible? That was the first thought in her mind. How could she stab into my body from countless galaxies away? That was utterly impossible. Right at this moment, her body and soul were vanishing at a speed visible to the naked eye. The aura of death caused the divine Dao Ling's mind to clear up. The divine Dao Ling hurriedly looked at Yi Xian. I know Miss Nian. Yi Xian said, spare her life. As soon as he finished speaking, the sword between the divine Dao Ling's brows suddenly vanished, and the divine Dao Ling's body went limp and fell to the ground. In the unknown starry sky, the woman in a plain dress opened her palm, and a sword light fell into her palm. It was the walk sword. The woman in a plain dress turned to look at the group of mysterious experts before her. Do you want to live? All of them nodded in unison. The woman in a plain dress opened her left hand, and a portrait appeared in her hand. She opened the portrait. Hi, brother. Everyone was stunned. What did that mean? The woman in a simple dress frowned slightly when she saw no one answer her. In an instant, the expressions of all of them turned grim, and the man in the lead hurriedly said, "From this moment onward, Senior's older brother is our older brother. No, he's our master. We'll go and follow master right now." With that, he turned around and left with the mysterious powerhouses behind him. The man in the lead instantly heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the woman in a simple dress didn't attack. Damn it! We were almost annihilated. Where did this deity come from? At this moment, an old man said, "Grand Heavenly Venerate, what should we do now?" Grand Empyrean pondered for a moment before saying, "Go find that youth." The old man frowned. "Are we really going to recognize that young man as our master?" Grand Empyrean said angrily, "What? Is it a loss for us to acknowledge him as our master?" The elder hesitated for a moment before saying, "We're a god-tier civilization after all. If we acknowledge someone else as our master, this..." The Grand Empyrean stared at the old man. "A level 10 civilization? Look carefully. We can't even take a single strike from him. You can't even take one sword." The old man's expression was quite unsightly. The Grand Empyrean slowly closed his eyes. "Why didn't she kill us? Is it because she was benevolent? No. It's because we're willing to submit to her. Understand?" The old man nodded. "I understand. But how are we going to find that young man?" The Grand Empyrean fell silent for a moment before he said, "Didn't the image of a woman arrive just now? We can use the space-time mark she left here to find her. She should know where that young man is." As soon as he finished speaking, he led the experts behind him and vanished into the distance. Divine Dao Kingdom. Within a hall. Xian sat at the side and drank tea slowly. On the other hand, the divine Dao Ling was sitting cross-legged at the side and healing herself. Even though the woman in a simple dress had withdrawn that sword strike, it had heavily injured her soul, so she was extremely weak at this moment. After a long time, the divine Dao Ling recovered slightly, and she gazed at Xian who sat nearby. "Who is she?" Xian replied, "My younger sister." The divine Dao Ling fell silent. Xian looked at the divine Dao Ling. "What's your name?" The divine Dao Ling replied, "Divine Dao Ling." Xian nodded. "Miss Ling, let's talk about reason. I met the princess of your country, the divine Dao spirit. She insisted that I bow to her, but I didn't. Then she attacked me and I killed her. Miss Ling, whose fault do you think it is?" The divine Dao Ling glanced at Xian. "The one who attacked first was at fault." Xian smiled. "When I came to Divine Dao Kingdom, the young Marquis of the Divine Marquis Mansion provoked me for no reason, so I..." The divine Dao Ling said softly, "Young Master Yi, I understand what you mean." Xian shook his head. "You don't understand. Qing'er attacked. If Qing'er didn't make a move, you wouldn't have listened to me at all. Just like what you said before, the so-called reason is built on the foundation of strength." With that, he stood up and walked to the divine Dao Ling. "Miss Ling, I really want to kill you and even destroy your divine Dao Kingdom. Because I've been really angry since the beginning, but I didn't ask Qing'er to do that. Do you know why?" With that, he walked out of the hall. The divine Dao Ling suddenly said, "Young Master Yi, I want to know why. After all, if you didn't speak just now, I would have been dead." Xian smiled. "Because of Sister Nian. I don't have to give face to others, but I have to give face to Sister Nian." With that, he walked out of the hall. Outside the hall, he saw the Divine Marquis Mansion's Situ Jing, and behind him stood a group of Divine Dao Kingdom officials. Situ Jing gazed at Xian in silence. Meanwhile, an old man suddenly pointed a finger at Xian with fury. "You're the one who killed Princess Ling and the junior Marquis." Xian nodded and smiled. "That's me." The old man spoke furiously. "How presumptuous. This is the Divine Dao Kingdom. How dare you act so arrogantly here? Capture him." Behind him, several soldiers were about to step forward and capture Xian. However, at this moment the Divine Dao Plume walked out of the hall. Everyone in the surroundings turned pale when they saw the Divine Dao Plume, and then they hurriedly knelt down. "Your Majesty." Situ Jing didn't kneel and he bowed slightly instead. The Divine Dao Ling's face remained emotionless. "What are you doing?" The old man hurriedly said, Your Majesty, he killed Princess Ling and the junior marquis of the Divine Marquis estate. His crimes are monstrous. I hope Your Majesty can execute him immediately and execute his entire family. Execute his entire family. The corners of Situ Jing's mouth twitched. At this moment he thought of that woman in a plain dress. The old man intended to say something, but the divine Dao Ling suddenly said, Shut up. The old man was stunned when he heard this. The other officials of the divine Dao kingdom were astounded as well, and Situ Jing, who led the group, had a gloomy expression on his face. Meanwhile, the divine Dao Ling opened his palm, and then a dark golden command token slowly floated over to Zhou Xian. The expressions of all the officials here changed drastically when they saw this golden command token. The Divine Emperor token. It was a supreme command token because it was left behind by the Divine Emperor all those years ago. Seeing this command token was equivalent to seeing the Divine Emperor, and even the current ruler of the kingdom had to bow before it. Moreover, the command token could mobilize any army within the Divine Dao Kingdom. It could be said that the authority of this command token was merely inferior to the Divine Dao Ling. It was exactly because of the special nature of the Divine Emperor token that it had never left the Divine Dao race since the Divine Dao Kingdom was founded, and it had always been in the possession of the successive rulers of the Divine Dao Kingdom. Moreover, from a certain perspective, the Divine Emperor token could be considered as a token of trust of the Divine Dao Kingdom's ruler. Because the authority of the Divine Emperor token was truly too great. The successive rulers of the Divine Dao Kingdom didn't dare to give it to an outsider. Yet at this moment the Divine Dao Ling actually intends to give it to this young man? All the experts of the Divine Dao Kingdom were stunned. On the other hand, the face of Situ Jing, who led the group, instantly turned pale, and her hand was trembling. The Divine Dao Ling gazed at Zhou Xian. Keep it. It'll be able to avoid a lot of unnecessary trouble in the future. Zhou Xian glanced at the Divine Emperor token and shook his head. I don't deserve a reward without doing anything. I don't want it. As soon as he finished speaking, he walked towards the distance. All the officials of the Divine Dao Kingdom almost fainted when they heard Zhou Xian. He actually doesn't want it? He actually doesn't want the Divine Emperor token? Some of the officials of the Divine Dao Kingdom couldn't restrain themselves from cursing. He actually refused the Divine Emperor token. Meanwhile, the Divine Dao Ling suddenly appeared in front of Zhou Xian, and she gazed at Zhou Xian. This token can save you a lot of trouble. I presume that you don't want to cause unnecessary trouble just like what happened before, right? Zhou Xian thought for a moment and then he put the Divine Emperor token away, turned around and left. He'd only taken a few steps when he suddenly stopped, and then he turned around to look at the Divine Dao Ling. Where's the Women's Academy? The Divine Dao Ling said, Divine Image Musa, take young Master Yi to the Women's Academy. Musa walked over to Zhou Xian and bowed slightly. Young Master Yi, come with me. As soon as he finished speaking, he gestured for Xianxia to follow him. Zhou Xian glanced at Musa and said, Please lead the way. Musa hurriedly replied, I wouldn't dare. As soon as he finished speaking, he led Zhou Xian along and vanished into the horizon. The officials of the Divine Dao Kingdom at the entrance to the Imperial Palace were stunned. Meanwhile, the Divine Dao Ling suddenly said, Besides Old Man Situ and the others, everyone else is dismissed. The officials of the Divine Dao Kingdom hurriedly bowed respectfully and left. They weren't idiots, so they naturally noticed that something was off. After all, that young man possessed the Divine Emperor token. Would His Majesty give it away just like that? Of course not. After they left, Situ Jing gazed at the Divine Dao Ling. Your Majesty, the revenge of my Divine Marquis estate. The Divine Dao Ling stared at Situ Jing. Don't offend him. Situ Jing spoke in a low voice. Your Majesty, is dead. The Divine Dao Ling spoke softly. If you insist on taking revenge, then wondering you won't be the only one to die. Your entire Divine Marquis estate will die as well. Situ Jing's face froze when she heard this, and then she slowly knelt down and remained silent. The Divine Dao Ling walked over to Situ Jing and said, Even if the Divine Marquis is alive, he has to endure it. Old man, if you continue to cause trouble for him, then I'll destroy the Divine Marquis estate. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and left. Situ Jing remained silent, and his expression was extraordinarily calm. Chapter 1917. Musa brought Zhou Xian to the Women's Academy. The Women's Academy wasn't in the imperial capital but in Yong City. On the way, Musa patiently explained to Yi Xian, Yong City is a small city. It was originally an abandoned ancient city. Because it's located in a remote area and it's surrounded by desert, no one lives in this city. His Majesty wanted Miss Moon Yin to establish an academy in the imperial capital, but she refused. We don't know why she chose such a remote place. Yi Xian smiled. Sister Nian. He was actually looking forward to meeting Sister Nian because he hadn't seen her for a long time. Musa looked at Yi Xian and said, Young Master Yi, do you know what token His Majesty gave you? Yi Xian opened his palm and the Divine Emperor token appeared in his hand. Is it very precious? Musa said, Young Master Yi, this is the Divine Emperor token. It's very precious. You can use it to mobilize any army in Shinto. Yi Xian looked at Musa. Any army? Musa nodded. Any army. Yi Xian said with a smile. So, this Divine Emperor token is very precious. Musa looked at Yi Xian and said, Very, very precious. Yi Xian smiled and didn't say anything. Half an hour later, Musa and Yi Xian arrived at Yong City. Musa was slightly shocked when he arrived at Harmony City. Because he noticed that Harmony City was bustling with people and endless streams of horses and carriages. It was extremely bustling and flourishing. Not only that, he also sensed a very powerful aura in Yong City. Musa was shocked because Yong City had changed a lot. After entering the city, they went straight to the Women's Academy. The Women's Academy was located on a mountain. When they arrived at the foot of the mountain, a pretty girl suddenly appeared in front of them. The girl looked at Yi Xian and Musa and smiled. You two don't look familiar. Musa said, Miss, this young Master Yi wants to see your dean. The woman looked at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi? Yi Xian nodded. Tell Sister Nian that I'm here. The woman blinked. You know the dean? Yi Xian nodded. The woman smiled and said, The dean is not here. Yi Xian frowned. Not here. The woman nodded. She left with Missin and the others a few days ago. Yi Xian asked, Where did he go? The woman shook her head. I don't know. Yi Xian said solemnly, Who is in charge of the academy now? The woman said, Instructor Ding. Yi Xian was stunned and then he said, Take me to see her. The woman hesitated for a moment before she said, Should I go notify them? Yi Xian nodded. All right. The woman was just about to turn around and leave when a voice resounded from the mountain, Let him in. The woman was slightly stunned and then she turned around to look at Yi Xian. Let's go. Yi Xian nodded and then he turned around to look at Musa. Musa, let's part ways here. Musa nodded. Young Master Yi, take care. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Yi Xian followed the woman to the top of the mountain, and Yi Xian saw a woman in a small courtyard. He knew her and it was Miss Ding. Yi Xian bowed slightly. Aunt Ding. Miss Ding smiled. I thought that you would only arrive after some time. I never expected that you would arrive so quickly. Yi Xian smiled. Aunt Ding, I never expected that you would be here as well. Miss Ding glanced at Yi Xian. The seamless state? Yi Xian nodded. Miss Ding stood up. Follow me. As soon as she finished speaking, she walked to the side and Yi Xian hurriedly followed her. On the way, Miss Ding asked, What do you plan to do next? Yi Xian said solemnly, Improve my strength. Miss Ding smiled. The best way to improve my strength is to fight. Yi Xian nodded. Indeed. Miss Ding said, Miss Nian said that if you come she will bring you to a place. Yi Xian was slightly curious. Where? Miss Ding said, The city of Myriad Domains. Yi Xian frowned. The city of Myriad Domains? Miss Ding stopped and she looked at Yi Xian. Give me your Xiao Ta and Azure Sword. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he passed the Xiao Ta and Azure Sword to Miss Ding. Miss Ding said, I will temporarily keep them for you. As she spoke, she pointed to a teleportation array not far away. Go in. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and then he asked, Aunt Ding, is it dangerous inside? Miss Ding nodded. Very dangerous. Yi Xian. Miss Ding smiled. Are you afraid? Yi Xian said with a smile. What are you afraid of? As he spoke, he glanced at Xiao Ta in Miss Ding's hand. Aunt Ding, can this Xiao Ta enter with me? Miss Ding smiled. Give me a reason. Yi Xian said, I have been through life and death with it for so many years and I have feelings for it. Moreover, I also want to bring it along for the training this time. Miss Ding looked at Yi Xian for a moment and then she smiled. All right. As she spoke, she passed Xiaota to Yi Xian. After receiving Xiaota, Yi Xian bowed slightly. Aunt Ding, I will be going now. As he spoke, he entered the teleportation array. The teleportation array was activated, and in an instant Yi Xian disappeared. After Yi Xian disappeared, Miss Ding was silent for a moment and then she turned to leave. Divine Dao Nation inside the palace. Musa walked to the Shinto Dao Ling and bowed slightly. Your Majesty, young Master Yi has gone to the City of Myriad Domains. The Shinto Dao Ling frowned slightly. City of Myriad Domains? Musa nodded. The Shinto Dao Ling was silent. Musa hesitated for a moment and then he asked, What is your Majesty worried about? The Shinto Dao Ling said softly, The City of Myriad Domains, this means that he will come into contact with the savage land. Musa said solemnly, Your Majesty is worried that young Master Yi will join the savage land? The Shinto Dao Ling nodded. Musa's face was gloomy. Your Majesty, young Master Yi has the Divine Emperor token. If he really joins the savage land, it will be a devastating disaster for our Divine Dao Nation. After a moment of silence, the Shinto Dao Ling said softly, Let's wait and see for now. Musa suddenly bowed slightly. Your Majesty, it is better to be safe than sorry. Your Majesty, please take back the Divine Emperor token immediately. The Shinto Dao Ling glanced at Musa. I just gave it out and you want to take it back? I am not as thick-skinned as you. Musa said solemnly, But Your Majesty, if that young Master Yi becomes friends with the savage land, then... The Shinto Dao Ling said softly, Don't worry. This young Master Yi is too stubborn. If he goes to the City of Myriad Domains, he will only cause trouble, big trouble at that. So let's just wait and see. As she said that, she seemed to have thought of something and frowned slightly. Send an order to the City of Myriad Domains. In our Divine Dao Nation, no one is to provoke him, no matter who it is. Musa smiled bitterly. Forget it. The more we do this, the more likely those little fellows will provoke him. The Shinto Dao Ling nodded. Then let them be. With that, she turned and left. After an unknown period of time, Yi Xian opened his eyes. At this moment, he was already in front of an old city. The sky was dark and covered in dark clouds, and it was extremely oppressive. The city before him was very old and slightly shabby, and it emitted a pungent smell of blood. Yi Xian said softly, This is not a good place. As he spoke, he walked towards the center of the city. At this moment, he suddenly turned his head and saw a man staring at him from the city wall not far away. The man held a dagger in his hand and the dagger was still stained with blood. Yi Xian ignored the man and continued walking towards the city. At this moment, the man suddenly smiled. Brother, please wait. Yi Xian looked at the man and the man grinned. I am a little short of money recently and I want to borrow some soul crystals from you. Don't worry, I will definitely return what I borrow. Robbery. Yi Xian smiled. How much do you want? The man chuckled. Give me 1 million. Yi Xian opened his palm and a spatial ring floated before the man. There were exactly 1 million soul crystals in the spatial ring. The man was stunned. He gave it to me just like that. In the distance, Yi Xian walked towards the city. The man looked at the spatial ring in front of him in a daze. This was the smoothest robbery he had ever had. A moment later, the man put the spatial ring away and caught up to Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked at the man. What? Not enough. The man said in a low voice. Brother, is this your first time coming to the City of Myriad Domains? Yi Xian nodded. First time. The man smiled. Brother, do you know what kind of place this City of Myriad Domains is? Yi Xian shook his head. It's my first time here, so I don't know anything. The man smiled. I'm Wuxia from the Divine Dao Nation. Divine Dao Nation. Yi Xian smiled lightly. Yi Xian. The man spoke in a low voice. Brother Yi, it's easy for problems to arise if you walk on the streets like this. Yi Xian smiled. Get robbed. Wuxia nodded and then he glanced at the surroundings and said, Follow me. As soon as he finished speaking, he led Yi Xian to the right. At this moment, a man suddenly appeared before them, and the man glanced at Wuxia before looking at Yi Xian with a hostile expression. Wuxia chuckled. Li Ka, he's my man. Li Ka glanced coldly at Wuxia. Your man? Wuxia nodded, lying. Li Ka's face was expressionless. Is your man that insensible? Wuxia's eyes narrowed slightly. What? You're not even going to give me this little bit of face? A wisp of a ridiculing smile appeared on the corners of Li Ka's mouth. Face? Wuxia, why should I give you face? Don't think that I don't know that you've already obtained benefits from him. You've obtained benefits yourself and you're asking us to give you face? I'm giving it to your ancestors. As he said that, he angrily pointed at Zhou Xian. If you don't give me 1,000,000 soul crystals, don't even think about crossing this road. At this moment, Zhou Xian suddenly disappeared on the spot. Before Wuxia could react, Li Ka's throat was directly pierced by Zhou Xian's sword. Instant kill. Wuxia was dumbfounded. Li Ka was also dumbfounded. Zhou Xian exerted force with his right hand, and the sword directly pierced through Li Ka's throat, causing blood to spurt out. Li Ka stared at Zhou Xian, his eyes filled with resentment. You're pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. Zhou Xian opened his palm and Li Ka's storage ring flew into his hand. Li Ka still wanted to say something, but Zhou Xian suddenly swung his sword. Li Ka was directly erased. Seeing this scene, the corner of Wuxia's mouth twitched. Damn, this guy is really fierce. Seeing that Zhou Xian was about to leave, Wuxia hurriedly followed. Brother Yi, what are you doing in the city of myriad domains? Zhou Xian subconsciously said, I'm here to act cool. Oh no, I'm here to gain experience. Wuxia. P.S. New Year, too busy, really too busy. I don't even have time to write every day. Finally, Happy New Year's Eve everyone.